Gavin Cross spent his last $15,000 on an abandoned Oregon farmhouse, a desperate gamble to give his 5-year-old daughter one final chance at stability. But when they arrived at dusk 6 weeks later, smoke was curling from the chimney. Someone was living in his house. He had no money left, no backup plan, and a little girl depending on him. Walking through that door, ready to fight for the only thing he had left, Gavin had no idea the trespassers inside would change everything, or that the biggest risk he'd ever take wouldn't be buying the house, but letting strangers stay. If you're ready to see how far desperation can push people and what happens when broken lives collide, stay with me until the end. And please, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The highway stretched gray and endless beneath a sky the color of old bruises. Gavin Cross gripped the steering wheel of his ancient Ford pickup with both hands, knuckles white, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the broken yellow line that disappeared into the Oregon twilight. Beside him, in the passenger seat, Maisie sat buckled in with her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest, watching the trees blur past the window in silence. She hadn't asked where they were going, not once in the 6-hour drive. That silence was worse than questions. Gavin glanced at her from the corner of his eye, her small face serious, her dark hair tangled from the wind through the cracked window, her eyes too old for 5 years. She'd learned not to ask about things that didn't have good answers. She'd learned that lesson when her mother died 18 months ago, and Gavin had been teaching it to her ever since, one failure at a time. "Almost there, sweetheart," he said quietly. Maisie nodded without looking at him. Gavin's throat tightened. He turned his attention back to the road, to the faded printout taped to the dashboard, a satellite image from the real estate listing, showing a small farmhouse surrounded by overgrown fields, a sagging barn in the distance, and a gravel driveway that looked more like a suggestion than an actual road. The listing had been brutal in its honesty, fixer-upper, significant repairs needed, cash only, as is. He'd read those words 100 times in the 6 weeks since he'd wired the money. $15,000. Everything he had left after selling the condo in Seattle, after the medical bills, after the funeral expenses, after the credit cards he'd maxed trying to keep Maisie in daycare while he worked double shifts that still weren't enough. $15,000 for a house he'd seen only in photographs, in a town he'd never visited, banking everything on the desperate hope that maybe he could fix it up, make it livable, find work in the area, and build something stable for his daughter before the weight of everything crushed them both. The GPS chirped. In 500 feet, turn right onto Maple Ridge Road. Gavin slowed, peering through the gathering darkness. The turnoff was barely visible, a gap in the trees marked by a leaning mailbox with no numbers. He turned and the truck bounced onto a rutted gravel road that wound upward through dense forest. "Is it much farther?" Maisie's voice was small. "Just up this hill." The trees opened suddenly, and there it was. The farmhouse sat in a clearing, a 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch that sagged on one end. The barn was worse, half collapsed, swallowed by blackberry vines. The fields beyond were waist-high with dead grass and scrub. In the fading light, the place looked exactly like what it was. Abandoned, forgotten, and probably a terrible mistake. But it was theirs. Gavin pulled to a stop at the end of the driveway and killed the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. He stared at the house, trying to see past the damage, trying to imagine it fixed, trying to believe this wasn't the worst decision he'd ever made. Then Maisie pointed. "Daddy, there's smoke!" Gavin's head snapped up. She was right. A thin curl of gray smoke was rising from the chimney, barely visible against the darkening sky. His stomach dropped. "Stay in the truck," he said sharply. "But stay in the truck." He grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment and pushed open the door, his pulse hammering in his ears. The house was supposed to be empty, completely empty. The seller had confirmed it. Utilities shut off, no one on the property for over 2 years. Someone was inside. Gavin crossed the yard quickly, boots crunching on dead leaves and broken glass. The porch steps groaned under his weight. The front door was closed, but not locked. The knob turned easily in his hand. He pushed it open slowly, the hinges shrieking. Warmth hit him first, then the smell of wood smoke and something cooking. "Hello?" His voice came out harder than he intended. "This is private property. No answer. He stepped inside, flashlight beam cutting through the dimness. The entryway opened into a main room that should have been a disaster, but wasn't. The floor had been swept. The windows, though cracked, were clean. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and a battered pot sat on a grate over the flames, steam rising. "I said this is private property." Gavin moved deeper into the room, anger mixing with confusion. "I own this house. You need to leave. Now!" A door to his left creaked open. Two young women stepped out, hands raised slightly, eyes wide with fear. They looked almost identical. Same height, same build, same dark blonde hair pulled back in ponytails. Twins, clearly, probably early 20s. They wore jeans and flannel shirts that hung loose on thin frames, and their faces were pale and exhausted. "Please," one of them said quickly. "Please don't call the police." "We'll go," the other added, voice shaking. "We'll leave right now. Just, please, don't call anyone." Gavin stared at them, his prepared anger faltering. These weren't the hardened squatters he'd imagined. They looked terrified and young, too young to be living like this. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" he demanded, but the edge had softened. "We didn't know anyone owned it," the first twin said rapidly. "We thought it was abandoned. We've been trying to take care of it. We cleaned, we fixed some things. We haven't damaged anything, I swear." "The chimney was blocked," the other interrupted. "We cleared it, and we patched the window in the kitchen where the rain was coming in. We weren't trying to—" "How long have you been here?" They exchanged a glance. 3 weeks, they said in unison. 3 weeks! Gavin dragged a hand through his hair, trying to process. "You've been squatting in my house for 3 weeks." "We didn't know it was yours," the first twin repeated. "No one's been here in years. We thought—" "I don't care what you thought." Gavin's frustration surged back. "This is my property. I bought it. I drove 6 hours to get here. I have a 5-year-old daughter in the truck who needs a place to sleep tonight, and you two are—" The front door opened behind him. "Daddy?" Gavin spun. Maisie stood in the doorway, her rabbit dangling from one hand, her eyes moving from him to the twins with careful curiosity. "Maisie, I told you to stay in the truck." "I waited." She stepped inside, looking around at the cleaned room, the fire, the two strangers. "Who are they?" The twins had gone very still, watching the little girl with something that looked like pain on their faces. "They're just leaving," Gavin said firmly. "Are they going to live with us?" Maisie asked. The question hung in the air. One of the twins made a small, choked sound. The other looked away, blinking hard. Gavin crouched down to Maisie's level. "No, honey, they were staying here by mistake. But now they're going to find somewhere else, okay?" Maisie tilted her head, studying the twins with that unsettling perception kids sometimes have. "They look sad." "Maisie, are you sad?" she asked the twins directly. The first twin swallowed hard. "We're okay, sweetheart." "You don't look okay." Maisie walked forward past Gavin and stopped in front of them. "Why are you here if it's not your house?" "Maisie, that's enough." Gavin straightened, but something in the moment held him back from pulling her away. The second twin knelt down, bringing herself to Maisie's eye level. Up close, Gavin could see the exhaustion carved into her features, the shadows under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly before she clasped them together. "We didn't have anywhere else to go," she said quietly. "We've been living in our car, and it got really cold at night, and we saw this house was empty, and we thought maybe we could stay for a little while, just until we figured things out." "Where's your mom and dad?" Maisie asked. The twins' face crumpled. "Our mom died." "Mine too," Maisie said simply. "Last year and a half ago." The room went silent except for the crackle of the fire. Gavin's chest constricted. He watched his daughter reach out and take the twins' hand with the kind of easy compassion he'd forgotten existed, and something inside him fractured. "I'm sorry," the twin whispered. "Me too," Maisie said. "Daddy says it's okay to be sad. Are you guys hungry? It smells like you're cooking something." The first twin cleared her throat. "Just soup, canned soup. We have a little food left. We can leave it for you. We'll pack up and be gone in 10 minutes. "Where will you go?" Maisie asked. "Maisie." Gavin's voice was strained. "Come here." But she didn't move. She was still holding the twins' hand, looking between the two women with that serious, ancient expression. "Daddy, Where will they go? That's not our problem, sweetheart. But they don't have anywhere. We'll figure it out, the first twin said quickly, standing up. We always do. Come on, Harlow, let's grab our stuff. So that was her name. Harlow. Gavin looked at the other twin. And you? Sadie. She stood as well, letting go of Maisie's hand. We're really sorry for the trouble. If you give us 5 minutes, where's your car? Gavin heard himself ask. They hesitated. Hidden, Sadie admitted. In the barn. We didn't want anyone to know we were here. And you've been living in it? Before you came here? It's not that bad, Harlow said defensively. It has a heater, sometimes. Gavin looked at them, really looked, thin, exhausted, scared. Young enough that they should have been in college or starting careers, not squatting in abandoned farmhouses and living out of cars. He thought about the fear in their eyes when they'd first appeared, the way they'd begged him not to call the police, the careful way Harlow had spoken to Maisie. He thought about the cleaned floor, the patched window, the cleared chimney. He thought about his daughter's hand in a stranger's and the words, "Our mom died." How did she die? He asked quietly. Your mother. The twins exchanged a glance. Sadie's jaw tightened. Does it matter? Maybe. A long pause, then Harlow spoke, her voice flat. She worked at a meat processing plant outside Eugene. Something went wrong with one of the machines. Safety guard was broken, hadn't been fixed. Her hand got pulled in. They got her out, but the damage was bad. Really bad. She couldn't work anymore. The company fought the workers' comp claim, said it was her fault for not following protocol. She couldn't afford the medical bills, couldn't afford the pain medication, couldn't afford anything. She tried, Sadie added, her voice thick. She tried so hard, but the debt just kept growing, and the pain kept getting worse, and there was nothing we could do. We were seniors in high school when it happened. By the time we graduated, she was already... She stopped, shook her head. She died 2 years ago. Infection from a surgery she couldn't afford to have done right the first time. Gavin felt something cold settle in his gut. What happened after? Everything she owed became ours, Harlow said bitterly. Medical debt, mortgage, utilities she couldn't pay while she was sick. We tried. We both worked 2 jobs. We sold everything. But it wasn't enough. They foreclosed on the house. We lost it all. We've been on the road for 8 months. 8 months in a car, Gavin repeated. Sometimes a car, sometimes shelters, sometimes motels when we could afford a night. Sadie lifted her chin. We're not criminals. We're not drug addicts. We're just desperate, Gavin finished. Yeah. He looked at his daughter. Maisie was watching him with those 2 old eyes, waiting to see what he'd do. He thought about the medical bills that had buried him after his wife's cancer. He thought about the foreclosure notice on their condo, the calls from debt collectors, the nights he'd sat at the kitchen table trying to figure out which bills to pay and which to let slide. He thought about the shame and the fear and the crushing weight of trying to stay afloat when the water kept rising. He knew that desperation. Daddy? Maisie's voice was very small. Can they stay for dinner? Every rational part of Gavin's brain screamed no. These were strangers, squatters. He didn't know them, didn't owe them anything, had his own problems to deal with. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to tell them to leave and move on with his life. But he looked at the fire they'd built, the floor they'd swept, the window they'd patched. He looked at the fear and exhaustion on their faces that mirrored what he saw in the mirror every morning. He looked at his daughter, who'd just told 2 strangers about her dead mother with more openness than she'd shown him in months. Sit down, he said roughly. The twins froze. What? Sit down. Let's eat. Then we'll talk. Talk about what? Sadie asked warily. About what the hell we're all going to do next. They sat around the fire, Gavin on an overturned crate, Maisie on his lap, the twins on a salvaged bench they'd apparently dragged in from somewhere. The soup was thin, mostly broth with a few vegetables and beans, but it was hot and better than nothing. They ate in awkward silence, plastic spoons scraping the bottoms of mismatched bowls. Maisie finished first. She set her bowl down carefully and looked at the twins. What are your names again? I'm Harlow, said the one on the left. And this is my sister Sadie. We're twins. I can tell, Maisie said seriously. You look exactly the same. We get that a lot. Can you tell each other apart? Harlow smiled, the first real smile Gavin had seen from either of them. Not always. Sometimes we trick people. That's cool. Maisie paused. Why were you living in a car? Maisie, Gavin warned. It's okay, Sadie said quietly. She set her bowl aside. We told you about our mom, right? After she died, we didn't have enough money to keep our house, so we had to leave. We've been trying to find a place we could afford, but everything's really expensive, and we don't have very much money saved up. So you came here? We were driving through and saw the house looked empty. We thought maybe we could stay for a little while, just until we figured things out. Maisie nodded like this made perfect sense. Daddy and me are kind of the same. We had to leave our house too. That's why we're here. Gavin's jaw tightened. He hadn't explained it to her in those terms, but she was right. They'd lost their home. They were here because it was the only option left. Is that true? Harlow asked, looking at him. He shrugged. We needed a fresh start. In a house like this? It was cheap. Sadie let out a short, humorless laugh. I bet. I'm going to fix it up, Gavin said defensively. I used to do construction. I know what I'm doing. By yourself? If I have to. That's going to take a while. I don't have a schedule. The twins exchanged a look. Harlow leaned forward slightly. What if we helped? Gavin blinked. What? What if we stayed and helped you fix the place up? She spoke quickly, like she was afraid he'd cut her off. We're hard workers. Sadie's good with tools. She worked maintenance at our old apartment complex. I can paint, clean, organize. We could help you get this place livable faster, and in exchange, we'd have somewhere to stay, just temporarily, until we get back on our feet. You want to squat here while I renovate? We want to help, Sadie corrected. There's a difference. You'd be getting free labor. We'd be getting a roof over our heads. Everybody wins. Gavin stared at them. That's insane. Why? Because I don't know you. Because this is my house. Because you could rob me or hurt us or... We won't, Harlow said firmly. I know you have no reason to trust us, but we're not going to hurt you or your daughter. We just need a chance. Everybody needs a chance, Gavin shot back. That doesn't mean I have to give it to you. Daddy? Maisie's voice was quiet but insistent. I think they should stay. He looked down at her, startled. What? They cleaned the house. They fixed things. They seem nice. She twisted to look up at him. And we could use help. You said it's going to take a really long time to fix everything by ourselves. That's different. How? Gavin didn't have a good answer. He looked at the twins again, trying to see past his own fear and exhaustion. They were watching him with desperate hope, and he hated how familiar that expression was. If I say yes, he said slowly, there would be rules. We'll follow any rules you want, Sadie said immediately. You don't even know what they are yet. Doesn't matter. We'll follow them. Gavin ran a hand over his face. This was crazy. This was the opposite of what he should do. He should tell them to leave, lock the doors, start fresh tomorrow without the complication of two strangers in his house. But he remembered being desperate. He remembered the humiliation of asking for help and being turned away. He remembered the cold certainty that no one was coming to save him. 1 month, he said finally. The twins straightened. What? 1 month trial. You help me get the house weather-tight and the basic systems working. In exchange, you can stay here, sleep in the second bedroom, use the kitchen, whatever. But if there's any trouble, any at all, you're gone immediately. No second chances. Done, Harlow said instantly. I'm not finished. Gavin's voice hardened. No stealing, no drugs, no bringing random people here. You pull your weight every single day, no slacking. You respect my daughter and this space. And if I ask you to leave for any reason, you go without argument. Those are the rules. We can do that, Sadie said. And one more thing. Gavin pointed at them. I find out you're lying to me about anything, who you are, where you came from, why you're really here. We're done. Immediately. We're not lying, Harlow said quietly. Everything we told you is true. It better be. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the agreement settling over all of them. Then Maisie slid off Gavin's lap and walked over to the twins. Welcome to our house, she said solemnly. Harlow's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. You should probably say thank you to my dad. He's the one who said yes. Thank you, both twins said in unison, looking at Gavin. He nodded stiffly. Don't make me regret it. We won't, Sadie promised. Gavin stood, suddenly exhausted beyond words. All right, it's late. Maisie needs to get to bed, and I need to unload the truck. We'll start fresh in the morning and figure out what needs to be done first. We can help unload, Harlow offered. No, just show me where you've been sleeping and we'll sort out the bedroom situation. The twins led them upstairs where a narrow hallway connected 3 rooms, one larger bedroom at the end, 2 smaller ones on either side. The twins had been staying in one of the small rooms, their few belongings packed neatly in 2 backpacks in the corner. The other small room was empty except for dust and cobwebs. Maisie and I will take the big room, Gavin decided. You two keep the one you're in. I'll clean out the other one tomorrow. We can use it for storage or something. Okay, Sadie said. He carried Maisie into the master bedroom, which was bare except for a stained mattress on the floor and peeling wallpaper. It would have to do for tonight. Tomorrow he'd figure out how to make it better. Daddy? Maisie's voice was drowsy as he laid her down on the mattress, covering her with the sleeping bag he'd brought from the truck. Did we do a good thing? I don't know yet, sweetheart. I think we did. They seem sad like us. Gavin's throat closed. He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. Get some sleep, okay? Okay. She closed her eyes, her rabbit tucked under her chin. Love you. Love you too, Maisie. He waited until her breathing evened out, then stood and walked back downstairs. The twins were sitting by the fire again, talking quietly. They looked up when he appeared. She asleep? Harlow asked. Yeah. Gavin moved to the window, looking out at the dark yard, the shadowy outline of the barn, the truck loaded with everything they owned. I need to be clear about something. What? Sadie's voice was cautious. My daughter is the only thing that matters to me. The only thing. I'm giving you this chance because I think I understand where you're coming from and because she asked me to. But if anything happens that makes me think she's not safe, you're gone. I don't care about your story. I don't care about fairness. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Sadie said. We'd never hurt her. You better not. Harlow stood up. For what it's worth, we really are grateful. You didn't have to do this. I know. Most people wouldn't have. Gavin turned to face them. Most people didn't watch their wife die because they couldn't afford better treatment. Most people don't know what it's like to be one disaster away from ending up in a car like you. I'm not doing this because I'm nice. I'm doing it because I remember. The twins nodded slowly. Get some rest, Gavin said. We start working at 7 tomorrow morning. He walked back upstairs, every muscle in his body screaming with exhaustion. He lay down beside Maisie on the thin mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. 2 strangers in his house. 2 desperate young women with nothing to lose and everything to gain. He could be making the biggest mistake of his life. Or maybe, just maybe, he was giving all of them a second chance. He closed his eyes and hoped it was the latter. Morning came too early. Gavin woke to pale gray light seeping through the cracked window and the sound of voices downstairs. For a disorienting moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then it all came rushing back. The house, the twins, the insane decision he'd made last night. He checked on Maisie, who was still sleeping, then headed downstairs. Sadie and Harlow were already up, standing in the kitchen with steaming mugs in their hands. They'd set up a camping stove on the counter and were boiling water for instant coffee. Morning, Harlow said, offering him a mug. We didn't know if you drink coffee, but we made extra just in case. Gavin took it gratefully. Thanks. How'd you sleep? Sadie asked. Fine. He hadn't really. His back was screaming from the thin mattress, but that wasn't their problem. What's the situation with utilities? No electricity, Sadie said. No running water. Gas lines shut off. We've been using the camping stove for cooking and hauling water from the old hand pump behind the house. It works, but the water needs to be boiled before you can drink it. Gavin grimaced, worse than he'd thought. What about the septic? We haven't tested it. We've been using a bucket system. Harlow's face flushed slightly. It's not great, but it works. First priority is getting the water and electric back on, Gavin said. I'll call the utility companies today, see what it takes to get service restored. Second priority is making sure the septic system actually functions. Third is patching any holes in the roof before the rain comes. We can help with all of that, Sadie offered. Good, because there's a lot to do. They spent the morning taking inventory. Gavin walked through every room with a notebook, writing down everything that was broken, missing, or needed replacement. The list grew depressingly long. Half the windows were cracked or broken. The kitchen sink was rusted through. Several floorboards upstairs were rotted and unsafe. The bathroom plumbing was a disaster. The roof had at least 3 visible holes, and the entire electrical system was outdated and potentially dangerous. This is going to take months, Harlow said, reading over his shoulder. Probably. Gavin closed the notebook. But we start with the basics. Water, electric, heat, everything else comes after. Maisie appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Is it breakfast time? Come here, kiddo. Gavin picked her up. What do you want to eat? Cereal? We don't have milk yet. How about oatmeal? Okay. While Harlow made breakfast on the camping stove, Gavin walked Maisie around the property, showing her the barn, the overgrown fields, the hand pump. She was quiet, taking it all in with those serious eyes. What do you think? He asked. It's big. Yeah, lots of space to run around once we clean it up. Will we live here forever? The question caught him off guard. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. Would you want to? She considered this. Maybe. If it gets pretty. We'll make it pretty, he promised. They ate breakfast together. The 4 of them crowded around the fire because the kitchen table was too wobbly to use. It felt strange and surreal, sharing a meal with 2 people who'd been strangers less than 12 hours ago. But Maisie chattered away to the twins about her stuffed rabbit and her favorite cartoons, and they listened like it was the most interesting thing in the world. And slowly the strangeness faded into something almost normal. After breakfast, Gavin drove into town to deal with utilities. The local power company said it would take a week and a $500 deposit to restore service. The water company was faster. They could turn it on in 2 days for a $300 deposit, but Gavin would need to have the pipes inspected first to make sure they wouldn't burst. He drove back to the house feeling the weight of every dollar he didn't have. When he pulled up, Sadie and Harlow were on the roof. What the hell are you doing up there? He shouted. Checking for leaks, Sadie called back. She was balanced on the peak of the roof, holding a hammer. There's 3 big holes and a bunch of small ones. We're patching what we can with some old sheet metal we found in the barn. Get down from there before you fall and break your neck. We're being careful. Gavin climbed up the ladder they'd propped against the side of the house. From the roof, he could see the full extent of the damage. Missing shingles, warped boards, places where water had been seeping in for years. But the twins had already covered 2 of the worst spots with makeshift patches, securing them with nails and prayer. This is temporary, Sadie said, noticing his expression. But it should hold until you can do it properly. Where'd you learn to do this? YouTube, mostly, and I helped fix the roof at our old apartment once when the landlord wouldn't do it. Gavin looked at the patches, then at Sadie. Not bad. She smiled, quick and genuine. Thanks. They worked through the afternoon, all 3 of them on the roof, while Maisie played in the yard below, carefully supervised by Harlow when Sadie came up to help. By sunset, they'd covered the major holes and replaced enough shingles to make the roof mostly weather-tight. Gavin climbed down, his shoulders aching, and found Harlow had made dinner, more soup, but with fresh vegetables she'd bought in town using money from their dwindling stash. You didn't have to do that, he said. I wanted to contribute. They ate on the porch, watching the sun set over the overgrown fields. Maisie fell asleep against Gavin's shoulder, exhausted from running around all day. The twins sat close together on the steps, their faces tired but content. Thank you, Harlow said quietly, for letting us stay. Gavin nodded. We'll see how it goes. It'll go well, Sadie said. We'll make sure of it. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that this crazy arrangement would work, that he could trust them, that they could help each other instead of dragging each other down. But trust was hard. Trust was dangerous. Still, as he carried Maisie inside and heard the twins cleaning up behind him, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, Hope. Maybe just a little. But it was there. The first week passed in a blur of exhaustion and small victories. Gavin learned quickly that the twins hadn't exaggerated their willingness to work. Sadie was up before dawn every morning, assessing what needed to be done and attacking it with methodical efficiency. Harlow moved through the house like a ghost, cleaning corners that hadn't been touched in years, organizing their meager supplies, and somehow making meals appear when everyone was too tired to think about food. Maisie thrived in ways Gavin hadn't expected. She followed Sadie around like a shadow, handing her tools and asking endless questions about how things worked. When Sadie rebuilt the porch railing, Maisie sat cross-legged on the boards, watching every movement with intense concentration. "Why are you using those screws instead of nails?" she asked. "Because screws hold better," Sadie explained patiently. "Nails can pop out over time, especially in wood this old. See how I'm pre-drilling the holes? That keeps the wood from splitting." "Can I try?" Sadie glanced at Gavin, who was replacing rotted boards a few feet away. He nodded slightly. "Sure." Sadie handed her the drill with the safety on. "Just hold it steady and squeeze the trigger gently when I tell you." Maisie's face lit up with concentration as she helped drill the pilot hole, and Gavin felt his chest tighten watching them. His daughter hadn't smiled like that in months. The utilities came back online on day 9. The power flickered on with a hum that made Harlow actually cheer from the kitchen, and the water started flowing, brown at first, then gradually clearing as they ran the taps. The house felt almost habitable with lights and running water, even if the bathroom still needed major work, and half the outlets sparked when you plugged anything in. "We should celebrate," Harlow announced that evening. "First real dinner with electricity." "We don't have much to celebrate with," Gavin pointed out. "I have $20 left. Let me go get something nice from town." "You don't have to spend your money. I want to." Her voice was firm. "Please, let me do this." She came back an hour later with a roasted chicken, a bag of potatoes, and a chocolate cake from the grocery store bakery. They ate at the kitchen table, which Sadie had reinforced that afternoon, and for the first time since arriving, it felt like a real meal in a real home. "This is really good," Maisie said through a mouthful of cake. "Don't talk with your mouth full," Gavin corrected automatically. "Sorry." She swallowed. "But it is really good." "Best cake I've had in months," Sadie agreed. Harlow smiled. "My mom used to make chocolate cake for our birthdays. Nothing fancy, just box mix, but she'd add extra frosting and put sprinkles on top. This tastes a little like that." The mention of their mother created a moment of silence. Then Maisie spoke up, her voice matter-of-fact. "My mom made really good pancakes, the kind with blueberries inside." Gavin's throat tightened. This was the first time she'd volunteered information about her mother without being prompted. "That sounds delicious," Harlow said gently. "They were. Daddy can't make them the same way. His pancakes are too flat." "Hey," Gavin protested weakly. "It's true." Maisie looked at him with complete seriousness. "But that's okay. You're good at other things." Sadie laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed her tired face. "What's he good at?" "Fixing stuff and reading bedtime stories with funny voices." "The funny voices are important," Harlow said, her eyes twinkling. "They are," Maisie insisted. "Regular voices are boring." Gavin found himself smiling despite everything. "Finish your cake, troublemaker." After dinner, they sat on the porch in the cool evening air. Maisie had fallen asleep on the couch inside, worn out from another day of following Sadie around the property. The 3 adults passed a thermos of coffee between them, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. "I have to admit," Gavin said quietly, "this is working better than I thought it would." "You sound surprised," Sadie said. "I am. I figured by now we'd have had at least one major blow-up." "The month's not over yet," Harlow joked. Then her expression turned serious. "But really, thank you. You didn't have to give us a chance, and you did. That means everything. You've earned it. The work you two have put in." Gavin shook his head. "I couldn't have done half of this alone. Not this fast." "So what's next?" Sadie asked. "We've got power and water. The roof's patched. What's the priority now?" Gavin pulled out his battered notebook, flipping to the list he'd been updating daily. "The bathroom needs a complete overhaul. New toilet, new sink, The shower doesn't work at all. The kitchen needs attention too. Half the cabinets are falling apart, and the stove's not safe to use. Long term, we need to deal with the heating system before winter really hits. That wood stove isn't going to cut it when it's below freezing. How much is all that going to cost? Harlow asked carefully. More than I have. The admission came easier now. I'm going to have to find work soon. I've been burning through what's left of my savings just getting the utilities on and buying materials. Another month, maybe 2, and I'll be broke. What kind of work are you looking for? Construction, ideally. That's what I know. But I'll take anything at this point. Handyman jobs, landscaping, whatever pays. Sadie leaned forward. What if we all looked for work? Pool our money? Tackle this as a team? You don't owe me that. Maybe not. But we're living here too. Seems fair we should contribute. I can find something in town, Harlow added. Waitressing, retail, cleaning, I've done it all before, and Sadie's good enough with repairs that someone will hire her. Gavin wanted to argue, wanted to say he could handle it himself, but the truth was he couldn't, not really. That would help, he admitted. A lot. Then it's settled. Sadie stood up, stretching. Tomorrow, we'll all go into town and see what's available. Divide and conquer. They headed inside as the temperature dropped. Gavin carried Maisie upstairs, tucking her into the sleeping bag on the mattress they'd scrubbed clean that week. She stirred slightly, mumbling something incoherent, then settled back into sleep. He stood there for a moment, watching her breathe, feeling the familiar ache of love and terror that came with being a single parent. Everything he did, every decision he made, was for her. And somehow, impossibly, the choice to let 2 strangers stay was turning out to be the right one. At least so far. The next morning, they drove into town together, all 4 of them crammed into Gavin's truck. The town of Maple Ridge was small, maybe 2,000 people, with a main street that consisted of a grocery store, a hardware store, a diner, a gas station, and not much else. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, which meant walking in as newcomers drew attention immediately. They split up to cover more ground. Gavin took Maisie to the hardware store, figuring if there was construction work to be found, that's where he'd hear about it. The owner, a grizzled man in his 60s named Frank, looked him over with open skepticism. You new in town? Frank asked. Just moved here. Bought the old Hendricks farmhouse up on Maple Ridge Road. Frank's eyebrows shot up. That place? Hell, I'm surprised it's still standing. Barely. I'm fixing it up. I'm a carpenter by trade. Worked residential construction in Seattle for 12 years. I'm looking for work in the area. Work's tight around here, Frank said bluntly. Most folks do their own repairs, and the contractors who do get hired are locals who've been here forever. I'm not picky. Handyman stuff, day labor, whatever's available. Frank studied him for a long moment. You any good? I'm excellent. That's so. Frank gestured toward the back of the store. I got a loading dock out there with a busted ramp. Been meaning to fix it for 3 months. You fix it right now, no pay, and I'll tell people you're competent. That's worth more than cash in a town this size. Gavin glanced at Maisie, who was examining paint samples with intense concentration. Deal. Can my daughter stay in here where it's warm? Long as she doesn't break anything. It took Gavin 40 minutes to assess the damage, scrounge the materials Frank grudgingly provided, and rebuild the ramp properly. When he finished, Frank came out to inspect it, testing the weight with several stomps of his boot. Not bad, he admitted. Not bad at all. So you'll spread the word? I'll tell people you know what you're doing. Whether they hire you is up to them. Frank pulled a business card from his pocket. But there's a developer over in Ridgeview, about 20 minutes east, who's always looking for skilled workers. Tell him I sent you. Might be worth a shot. Thank you. Gavin pocketed the card. Don't thank me yet. He's a hard ass and he doesn't pay great, but it's steady work if you can handle it. Gavin collected Maisie and they headed to the diner where they'd agreed to meet the twins. He found them sitting in a booth, looking deflated. Any luck? He asked, sliding in beside Maisie. Harlow shook her head. The diner's fully staffed. So's the grocery store. The gas station doesn't need anyone. It's like the whole town's already taken. Did you try the motel out on the highway? They said they'd keep our applications on file, Sadie said with barely concealed frustration, which is code for don't hold your breath. I might have a lead, Gavin offered. He explained about the developer in Ridgeview. It's not much, but it's something. Better than nothing, Harlow said. They ordered lunch, cheap sandwiches and fries, and were halfway through the meal when an older woman approached their table. She was well dressed, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, and she moved with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. "Excuse me," she said, looking at Gavin. "I overheard you talking. You're the one who bought the Hendricks place?" "That's right. I'm Margaret Chen. I own the farm 2 miles down from you." She extended a hand which Gavin shook. "Welcome to the area. That house has been empty for a long time. It needs a lot of work. We're managing." Margaret's gaze shifted to the twins, then to Maisie, her expression thoughtful. "Are you all family?" "Friends," Gavin said carefully. "We're helping each other out." "I see." Margaret pulled a chair from a nearby table and sat down without invitation. "I'm going to be direct because that's how I operate. I need help on my farm. Nothing glamorous, cleaning stalls, mending fences, general maintenance. The pay is $12 an hour, and I need someone who can start immediately. Are any of you interested?" The twins exchanged glances. "What kind of farm?" Sadie asked. "Horses. I run a small boarding and training operation. 10 stalls, 6 horses currently. It's just me and my husband, and frankly, we're getting too old to keep up with everything." "I don't know anything about horses," Harlow admitted. "I can teach you. What I need is someone reliable who's willing to work hard and learn. You two look like you fit the bill." "Both of us?" Sadie asked. "If you're both willing, I can split the hours, give you each 20 to 30 hours a week. That's enough to make a real difference without being overwhelming." Harlow looked at Gavin. "What do you think?" "I think you should take it," he said honestly. "Margaret's offering you legitimate work. That's not easy to find." "Then we accept," Sadie said to Margaret. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Don't be late." Margaret stood, sliding a business card across the table. "That's my address and number. I'll see you then." She walked away, leaving them slightly stunned. "Did that just happen?" Harlow asked. "I think we just got jobs," Sadie said, a grin spreading across her face. "We all got jobs," Gavin corrected, pulling out the developer's card. "Or at least we've got leads. That's more than we had this morning." Maisie tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can I see the horses?" "We'll ask Margaret," he promised. "Maybe she'll let you visit sometime." They drove back to the farmhouse with a lightness that hadn't been there before. The twins talked excitedly about the work, making plans for how they'd split the hours and what they'd do with the money. Gavin felt some of the weight lift from his shoulders. If they could all bring in income, they might actually be able to make this work. That evening, he called the developer in Ridgeview. The man, whose name was Marcus Webb, sounded gruff and impatient on the phone, but he agreed to meet Gavin the next morning at a job site. 6 a.m., Webb said. "Don't be late and bring your own tools. If you're any good, I'll put you to work. If you're not, don't waste my time." "I'll be there," Gavin promised. He hung up and found Harlow in the kitchen, attempting to cook something on the ancient stove they'd managed to get working. The smell of burning filled the air. "Need help?" he asked. "I think I killed dinner." Gavin peered into the pan, where something that might have once been chicken was now charred beyond recognition. "Yeah, that's dead." "I'm a terrible cook." "You made soup." "Soup is hard to screw up. Apparently everything else is beyond me." She scraped the blackened mess into the trash with a grimace. "My mom did all the cooking. I never learned properly." "I'm not much better," Gavin admitted. "We've been living on sandwiches and cereal since my wife died." Harlow was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Can I ask what happened?" "To your wife?" Gavin leaned against the counter, the question pulling at old wounds. "Cancer. Started in her lungs, spread everywhere before we caught it. By the time they diagnosed it, there wasn't much they could do. We tried treatments anyway, surgery, chemo, radiation, but nothing worked. She lasted 8 months from diagnosis to—" He stopped, unable to finish. "I'm so sorry." "The worst part wasn't watching her die," Gavin said quietly. "The worst part was knowing I couldn't save her. Couldn't afford the better treatments, couldn't get her into the clinical trials, couldn't do anything except watch and feel useless. The medical bills bankrupted us. When she died, I had nothing left. No savings, no house equity, nothing. Just Maisie and a mountain of debt." That's why you came here. Only place I could afford. Figured if I could fix it up, maybe I could flip it eventually, make enough to start over somewhere better, give Maisie the life she deserves. He laughed bitterly. Stupid plan, probably. It's not stupid. It's hope. Hope doesn't pay bills. No, Harlow agreed, but it keeps you moving, and sometimes that's enough. They stood in companionable silence for a moment. Then Sadie appeared in the doorway, Maisie on her hip. Someone wants to say goodnight, Sadie announced. Maisie reached for Gavin, who took her with practiced ease. Ready for bed, kiddo? Can Harlow read me a story? Maisie asked. Gavin blinked, surprised. Sure, if Harlow doesn't mind. I'd love to, Harlow said softly. They all went upstairs together. While Gavin got Maisie into her pajamas, Harlow found the small stack of picture books they'd brought from Seattle. She settled on the edge of the mattress, and Maisie curled up beside her with her rabbit. This one, Maisie said, pointing to a worn copy of a book about a bear looking for home. Harlow read with gentle expression, doing different voices for each character. Maisie's eyes grew heavy, and by the final page she was almost asleep. The end, Harlow whispered, closing the book. Thank you, Maisie mumbled. You're a good reader. Thank you for letting me read to you. Gavin kissed Maisie's forehead. Good night, sweetheart. Night, Daddy. Night, Harlow. Night, Sadie. Good night, Maisie, they chorused. Downstairs, Gavin made a pot of coffee while the twins cleaned up the kitchen disaster. They fell into an easy rhythm, moving around each other without speaking, and Gavin realized with some surprise that he was getting used to having them there. The house felt less empty with their presence, less like a tomb of broken dreams. So tomorrow's a big day, Sadie said, drying the last dish. We all start working. Assuming Webb actually hires me, Gavin said. He will. You're good at what you do. How would you know? You've barely seen me work. I've seen enough. Sadie tossed the towel aside. You rebuilt that porch railing in 4 hours, and it's solid as a rock. You rewired the kitchen without electrocuting yourself. You know what you're doing. She's right, Harlow added. You should have more confidence. Gavin snorted. Confidence isn't my strong suit these days. Fake it till you make it, Sadie suggested. That's what we've been doing. Is it working? Sometimes. They talked late into the night about work and plans and small hopes for the future. It was the first time since arriving that Gavin felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. The alarm went off at 5 a.m. Gavin dragged himself out of bed, careful not to wake Maisie, and got ready in the dark. He found coffee already made in the kitchen and a note from Harlow. Good luck. You've got this. He arrived at the job site in Ridgeview just before 6. It was a new housing development, half-finished homes scattered across cleared land. Marcus Webb was exactly what Gavin expected. Mid-50s, built like a bull, with a permanent scowl and eyes that missed nothing. You cross? Webb asked. Yes, sir. Frank says you're competent. That true? Yes, sir. We'll see. I need framing done on units 12 through 15. Can you frame? In my sleep. Smart mouth's going to get you fired before you start. Not being a smart mouth, stating a fact. Webb stared at him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. All right, show me what you've got. You work through today without screwing up, I'll give you a week trial. Week goes well, you're hired on permanent. Pay is $22 an hour, 40 hours minimum, overtime when available. Benefits kick in after 90 days. $22 an hour. Gavin's chest loosened. That was livable. That was real money. When do I start? Right now. Grab a tool belt from the trailer and get to work. Gavin worked harder than he'd worked in years. Framing was physical, demanding labor, but it was also familiar. The weight of the hammer, the rhythm of driving nails, the satisfaction of seeing walls take shape under his hands. By noon, he'd completed more than Webb's other workers, and by the end of the day, he'd earned a grudging nod of approval. Not bad, Cross, Webb said. Be here tomorrow, same time. Yes, sir. Gavin drove home exhausted but lighter. He had a job. Real, steady work that would let him pay bills and fix the house and maybe, finally, breathe. He pulled up to the farmhouse just as the twins were returning from their first day at Margaret's farm. They looked windblown and tired. but happy. "How'd it go?" he called. "Horses are terrifying," Harlow announced, "but also kind of amazing." "Margaret's intense," Sadie added, "but fair. She taught us everything, how to muck stalls, how to feed, how to check hooves. My back is killing me, but I actually liked it." "I got hired," Gavin said. "Really?" Harlow's face lit up. "That's amazing. 22 an hour, 40 hours minimum." Sadie whistled. "That's good money around here. Combined with what you two are making, we might actually be able to afford to fix this place properly." Gavin looked at the house. Still shabby, still damaged, but somehow more hopeful than it had been. "We might actually pull this off." That night, they celebrated with another grocery store roasted chicken and a sense of cautious optimism. Maisie, thrilled that everyone was home and happy, talked nonstop about her day exploring the property and finding a family of rabbits living under the barn. "Can we keep them?" she asked. "They're wild rabbits, kiddo. They already have a home." "But they could live with us." "They'd be scared living in the house. They're happier outside." Maisie considered this seriously. "Okay, but can I visit them?" "Every day if you want." After dinner, Gavin found himself alone on the porch with Sadie while Harlow helped Maisie get ready for bed. The evening air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of pine and earth. "This is weird, right?" Sadie said suddenly. "What is?" "This. All of this. 2 weeks ago we were squatting in your house, terrified you were going to call the cops. Now we're living here, working together, acting like—" She trailed off. "Like a family?" Gavin finished quietly. "Yeah, that." "It is weird," he admitted, "but it's also working." "What happens when the month is up?" The question hung between them. They'd agreed to a 1-month trial, and that month was more than half over. Gavin hadn't wanted to think about what came next, whether the twins would leave, whether they should leave, whether any of this was sustainable long term. "I don't know," he said honestly. "What do you want to happen?" Sadie was quiet for a long moment. "I want to stay," she said finally. "Harlow does too, even if she hasn't said it yet. This is the first time in 2 years we've felt safe. The first time we've had a real roof over our heads and people who—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "People who treat us like we matter." "You do matter." "That's not what the world's been telling us lately." Gavin understood that feeling all too well. "If you want to stay past the month, we can talk about it. Figure out something more permanent. But I need to know you're committed, not just to living here, but to making this work, really work." "We are," Sadie said fiercely. "I promise. Then we'll figure it out." The door opened and Harlow stepped out, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. "Maisie wants you to tuck her in," she told Gavin. He stood, heading inside. But he paused in the doorway, looking back at the twins. "Thank you," he said, "for everything you've done, for giving a damn. It matters." "Thank you for letting us," Harlow replied softly. Upstairs, Maisie was already drowsy, her rabbit tucked under her chin. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" "I like it here." "Yeah?" "Yeah. It feels like home now. With Sadie and Harlow here." Gavin's throat tightened. "I'm glad, kiddo." "Are they going to stay forever?" "I don't know about forever, but maybe for a while." "Good." Maisie yawned hugely. "I want them to stay. They're nice." "They are nice. And they make you smile more." Gavin blinked, surprised. "Do they?" "Uh-huh. You didn't smile much before. Now you do." He didn't know what to say to that. Instead, he kissed her forehead and turned off the light. "Good night, Maisie." "Night, Daddy." He stood in the hallway for a long time after, thinking about what she'd said. Maybe she was right. Maybe the twins' presence was changing more than just the house. Maybe it was changing him too. Downstairs, he found them still on the porch, talking quietly. He joined them, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge overhead. It wasn't perfect. The house was still broken in 100 ways, money was still tight, and they were all still carrying wounds that hadn't healed. But for the first time in longer than Gavin could remember, he didn't feel alone. And that was something. That was enough. The rhythm they'd found held for 3 more weeks, and in that time the house transformed. With steady paychecks coming in from all three adults, they could afford real materials instead of scrounged scraps. Gavin replaced the kitchen sink and got the ancient stove working safely. Sadie rebuilt the bathroom from the ground up, installing a new toilet and shower with surprising skill. Harlow painted every room they finished, choosing warm colors that made the spaces feel lived in rather than abandoned. Maisie started calling it home without hesitation. But it was on a Thursday evening in late October, when the first real cold snap hit and they gathered around the fireplace after dinner, that everything changed. They'd been talking about winter preparations, insulation, weather stripping, whether the ancient furnace in the basement could be salvaged, when Maisie fell asleep on the couch, her head in Harlow's lap. The conversation drifted into comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the wind howling outside. Then Gavin said, "The month's up." The twins went still. "I know," Sadie said quietly. "We need to talk about what happens next." Gavin leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You've both worked harder than I had any right to expect. This place wouldn't be half of what it is without you. Maisie's happier than she's been since her mother died. And He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't want you to leave." Harlow's breath caught. "You don't?" "No, but I need to understand what this is, what we're doing, because right now we're in this weird limbo where you're not guests, you're not employees, you're not family, you're something in between, and that can't last forever." "What do you want us to be?" Sadie asked. "I don't know. That's why we need to talk about it." Harlow shifted carefully, trying not to wake Maisie. "What if we just kept going the way we are, pooling money, sharing work, living together?" "For how long?" "As long as it makes sense." "That's not a plan," Gavin said. "That's just kicking the can down the road." "What do you want, then?" Sadie's voice had an edge. "A contract? A timeline? Some guarantee that we're not going to screw you over?" "I want honesty." Gavin met her eyes. "I want to know why you're really here and what you're really running from." The words landed like a punch. The twins exchanged a long look, some wordless communication passing between them. Then Harlow spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We told you the truth about our mom. I believe that part. But there's more. I've seen how you react when cars come up the driveway, how you both tense up when strangers are around, how you never talk about anything from before your mom got hurt. You're hiding from something, and I need to know what it is." Sadie's jaw tightened. "Why?" "So you can judge us, decide we're too much trouble." "So I can protect my daughter," Gavin said firmly. "If there's something dangerous in your past, something that could follow you here, I need to know. She's my priority. Always." "We would never put Maisie at risk," Harlow said, her eyes shining with tears. "Never." "Then tell me the truth." The silence stretched out, broken only by the fire and Maisie's soft breathing. Finally, Sadie stood and walked to the window, staring out into the darkness. "Our mom's boyfriend," she said flatly. "That's what we're running from." Gavin waited. "After she got hurt, after she couldn't work anymore, this guy showed up, Derek. He was all sympathy at first, all helpfulness. Paid some of the bills, brought groceries, acted like he cared. Mom was so desperate for help that she didn't see what he really was. By the time we did, he'd moved in and taken over." "Taken over how?" Gavin asked carefully. "He controlled the money. Every penny that came in, disability, whatever we could earn, he managed it, said he was helping, keeping us organized. But really he was making sure Mom stayed dependent on him. And when she started questioning where the money was going, when she tried to take back control, he got mean." Harlow's voice was thick. "He never hit her. He was too smart for that. But he'd break things, punch walls right next to her head, scream until she was crying. And he made it clear that if she tried to leave or call the cops, he'd make sure we lost everything. He told her the debt collectors would take the house faster if she made trouble," Sadie continued. "Said her disability would get cut off if anyone investigated. She was so scared and so sick that she believed him. So we all just endured it. For 2 years. When she died," Harlow said, "we thought we'd be free. But Derek showed up at the funeral and told us the house was his now. Said Mom had signed papers giving him power of attorney, giving him rights to her estate. We didn't even know if it was true, but we couldn't afford a lawyer to find out. He moved back in the day after we buried her. Gavin felt his stomach turn. What did he do? Same thing he did to Mom. Controlled everything, made us work and hand over our paychecks, kept us isolated, told us we were worthless, that no one would believe us if we tried to get help, that we owed him for everything he'd done for our family. Sadie's voice shook with fury. We stayed for 6 months after Mom died, trying to save enough to leave, but he watched us like a hawk. Finally, one night when he passed out drunk, we took what little money we'd managed to hide and ran. We've been moving ever since, Harlow added, never staying anywhere long enough for him to track us down. We had a place in Eugene for a while, but someone saw us and we got paranoid that word would get back to him. That's when we ended up in the car, and then here. Do you think he's looking for you? Gavin asked. We don't know, Sadie admitted. Maybe he's moved on. Maybe he found some other desperate woman to control. Or maybe he's still out there, angry that we escaped and determined to drag us back. We just don't know. The room fell silent except for the crackling fire. Gavin processed what they'd told him, understanding now the fear he'd seen in their eyes that first night, the way they kept their car hidden, the tension whenever someone new appeared. Why didn't you tell me this before? He asked finally. Would you have let us stay if we had? Harlow countered. If we told you we were running from an abusive piece of garbage who might show up looking for us? I don't know, Gavin said honestly. Maybe not. Exactly. So we told you the parts that were true about Mom dying, about the debt, about losing everything, and left out the parts that would make us sound like trouble. Sadie turned from the window, her face hard. We're sorry we lied by omission, but we were desperate, and we didn't have anywhere else to go. Gavin rubbed his face, exhaustion washing over him. Does he know your names? Have a way to track you? Our legal names, yes, but we've been using fake names when we work, paying under the table, staying off social media, basically trying to be invisible. Margaret knows your real names, Gavin pointed out. So does Webb, since you're on my emergency contacts. The twins went pale. We didn't think about that, Harlow whispered. This is exactly why I needed to know, Gavin said, trying to keep his voice level. If this guy is actually looking for you, and he's smart enough to check public records or make calls, he could find you. And if he shows up here, I need to be prepared. We'll leave, Sadie said immediately. Right now. We'll pack up and go, and you and Maisie will be safe. Hang on. No, she's right, Harlow said, carefully moving Maisie's head from her lap and standing. We never should have stayed this long. We knew better. We just wanted... Her voice cracked. We just wanted to feel normal for a little while. Sit down, Gavin said firmly. Gavin, sit down. They sat, looking miserable and terrified. On the couch, Maisie stirred slightly but didn't wake. Gavin took a breath, thinking hard. Everything in him screamed that this was too much risk, too much complication. The smart move was to let them go, cut ties cleanly, keep Maisie safe from any potential fallout. But he looked at Harlow, who'd spent weeks reading bedtime stories to his daughter with infinite patience. At Sadie, who'd taught Maisie how to use tools and treated her like she mattered. At both of them, who'd worked themselves to exhaustion to turn this broken house into a home. He thought about Derek, about the kind of man who'd prey on a dying woman and terrorize her daughters, about the fact that the twins had been 19 years old when they'd escaped, barely adults, trying to survive in a world that hadn't shown them much mercy. He thought about his own desperation, his own fear, the weight of trying to protect Maisie from a world that kept kicking them down. Here's what we're going to do, he said finally. You're going to stay. What? They said in unison. You're going to stay, but we're doing this right. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk to a lawyer, there's got to be one in Ridgeview, and find out what your legal options are. If this Derek character shows up, I want to know exactly what he can and can't do and what we can do to keep him away. We're also going to set up some basic security, locks on the doors, maybe a camera or two. Nothing elaborate, but enough to give us warning if anyone unwanted shows up. We can't afford a lawyer, Harlow said. I can. Or at least I can afford a consultation. We'll figure it out. Why are you doing this? Sadie's voice was raw. Why are you taking this risk for us? Because you took a risk for me, Gavin said simply. That first night, you could have run when I showed up, could have grabbed your stuff and disappeared. But you stayed, you told the truth, or most of it, and you've spent every day since proving you're worth trusting. Maybe I'm an idiot, but I don't think you're going to bring trouble to my door on purpose. And if trouble shows up anyway, we'll deal with it together." Harlow started crying quietly, her shoulders shaking. Sadie moved to her sister's side, wrapping an arm around her. "Thank you," Harlow managed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We've got work to do." Gavin stood, feeling the weight of the decision settle on him. "But for now, let's get some sleep. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to make this permanent." That night, lying in the dark with Maisie sleeping beside him, Gavin wondered if he'd just made the best or worst decision of his life. The twins had been honest, finally, but their past was complicated and potentially dangerous. He was responsible for his daughter's safety, and he'd just committed to harboring two young women who were hiding from someone who might come looking. But he remembered the fear in their eyes when they'd begged him not to call the police that first night, the exhaustion in their voices when they'd talked about their mother, the way they'd both lit up when Maisie laughed. They were good people who'd been dealt a terrible hand, just like him. He had to believe this would work out. He didn't have the energy to believe anything else. The next morning, Gavin called in sick to work for the first time and drove to Ridgeview alone. He found a small law office above a pharmacy and climbed the narrow stairs to meet with an attorney named Patricia Reeves. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, and expensive-looking in a way that made Gavin nervous about the bill. He explained the situation as briefly as possible. Two young women, deceased mother, abusive boyfriend claiming legal rights, need to know their options. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking notes. When he finished, she sat back in her chair. "First question," she said. "Do these young women have any documentation? Death certificate for the mother, proof of residence, anything?" "I don't know. I'll ask." "They'll need it if they want to contest any claims this boyfriend is making." Second question. "Has he actually tried to contact them since they left?" "Not that they've mentioned." "Then there's a good chance he's moved on. Men like that, controllers, abusers, they usually find new targets rather than chasing old ones indefinitely. It's possible he never even filed anything legal. The power of attorney he claimed to have could be completely fabricated. But they don't know that," Gavin said. "No, and that's how abusers maintain control even after victims escape, through fear and uncertainty." Patricia leaned forward. "Here's my advice. Have them pull their mother's death certificate and any records they have about the estate. I can check probate records, see if any claims were actually filed. If nothing was filed, that's good news. Means he was bluffing. If something was filed, we can contest it, especially if they can prove coercion. Either way, they need to know exactly where they stand legally." "What about protection, if he does show up?" "Oregon has protective order laws, but they'd need to prove a credible threat. Has he threatened them directly? Physically harmed them?" "He terrorized them and their dying mother for 2 years." "But can they prove it? Texts, emails, witnesses?" Gavin's jaw tightened. "Probably not." "Then a protective order is unlikely. However, if he shows up on your property and you tell him to leave and he refuses, that's trespassing. You can call the police and have him removed. Document everything. Photos, videos, witnesses. Build a paper trail." "That's it? That's all we can do?" "Legally, yes. Practically?" Patricia gave him a knowing look. "Make sure your doors lock. Install cameras. Let your neighbors know to watch for anyone suspicious. Don't advertise their location on social media. Be smart and be careful." The consultation cost him $200 he couldn't afford, but he left with a business card and instructions for what the twins needed to provide. It wasn't everything he'd hoped for, but it was something. When he got back to the farmhouse, he found chaos. Margaret Chen was standing in the front yard, her usually composed face flushed with anger, while Sadie and Harlow stood on the porch looking devastated. Maisie sat on the steps, watching everything with wide eyes. "What's going on?" Gavin demanded, crossing the yard quickly. "Ask them," Margaret said coldly, gesturing at the twins. "Ask them why they lied to me." Gavin's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "Their names, the references they gave me, all lies." Margaret crossed her arms. "I got a call this morning from someone claiming to be their uncle, asking if I'd seen them. Said they'd run away from home, that the family was worried sick. When I checked the names against their employment paperwork, they didn't match. So I called them, and they admitted they'd been using fake names." "Margaret, I can explain," Harlow started. I don't want explanations. I want the truth. Are you running from family, from the law? What kind of trouble am I harboring? It's not like that, Sadie said desperately. We're not criminals. We're not running from family. We're running from someone who hurt us. Then why lie? Because we were scared. Because we thought if people knew our real names, he might find us. Margaret looked at Gavin. Did you know about this? Not until last night, he admitted. But I know the truth now, and they're not trouble. They're survivors. That's not good enough. I can't employ people under false names. It's illegal, and it puts my business at risk. She shook her head. I'm sorry, girls, but you're fired, effective immediately. Please, Harlow begged. We need this job. We'll use our real names. We'll give you whatever documentation you want. Just please don't fire us. I can't trust you anymore. That's the problem. Margaret's voice softened slightly. I'm sorry for whatever you're going through, but I have to protect myself and my business. She walked to her truck and drove away, leaving the twins standing there like the ground had opened beneath them. Maisie ran to Gavin, and he picked her up automatically, his mind racing. This was bad. This was exactly the kind of fallout he'd been afraid of. Who called her? He asked quietly. We don't know, Sadie said, her voice hollow. She wouldn't say, just that someone claiming to be our uncle had our descriptions and was looking for us. Do you have an uncle? No. Our mom was an only child, and our dad died when we were babies. It was Derek. Harlow wrapped her arms around herself. It had to be Derek. He found us. Gavin felt cold dread settle in his chest. How would he find you? You said you've been careful. We have been. We don't use social media. We pay cash for everything. We've been invisible. Except you weren't, Gavin said grimly. You used your real names with Margaret. She probably has your social security numbers for payroll. If Derek has any connections, knows someone who can access databases, or has a private investigator, or even just knows how to search public records, he could have tracked you down. So what do we do? Sadie asked, and for the first time since he'd met her, she sounded completely lost. Gavin set Maisie down gently. Kiddo, go inside and play in your room for a bit, okay? But now please. She went, glancing back worriedly. Once she was inside, Gavin turned to the twins. We have 3 options, he said. 1, you run again. Pack up and disappear before he shows up. 2, you stay and we prepare to deal with him if he comes. 3, you go to the police right now and file a report. Get everything on record in case this escalates. The police won't help, Sadie said bitterly. We tried once back when Mom was alive. They said it was a domestic situation, told us to get a restraining order, sent us away. Mom was too scared to follow through, and nothing changed. That was then. This is different. How? Because now you're adults with your own legal standing. Because you're not under his roof anymore. Because you have witnesses. Me, Margaret, people who can verify you've been living independently. Or we just leave, Harlow said quietly. Cut our losses and go. We've done it before. Is that what you want? Gavin asked. To keep running? No, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. But I don't want him to find us. I don't want him to hurt anyone here. And I especially don't want him anywhere near Maisie. Gavin looked between them. These 2 young women who'd somehow become essential to his life in just 6 weeks. They were terrified and trying to be brave, and he understood that feeling in his bones. Here's what we're doing, he said. You're staying. We're going to the police station right now and filing a report. We're documenting everything, his history of abuse, the threats, the fact that he's trying to track you down. Then we're coming back here and we're going to make this place secure. If he shows up, we'll be ready. Gavin, you don't have to do this, Sadie said. Yeah, I do. You're part of this household now, whether we meant for that to happen or not. And I protect my household. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Then Harlow stepped forward and hugged him, quick and fierce and desperate. Sadie followed, and for a moment Gavin stood there with both twins clinging to him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. Maybe he was. Okay, he said finally, gently extracting himself. Let's go deal with this. The police station in Maple Ridge was small, just 3 officers on duty. The sergeant who took their report was professional but skeptical, especially when Gavin explained about Derek and the years of psychological abuse. Without physical evidence or witnesses to actual threats, there's not much we can do, the sergeant said. But I'll file this report, and if he shows up and causes trouble, you call us immediately. We'll have it on record that there's a history. It was better than nothing, but not by much. They spent the rest of the day making the house as secure as they could with a tight budget. Gavin installed deadbolts on all the doors and bought motion sensor lights for the entrances. Sadie rigged up a basic camera system using her phone and an old laptop, pointing it at the driveway. It wasn't sophisticated, but it would alert them if someone approached. That evening, they sat down together, all four of them, including Maisie, and Gavin explained in simple terms that someone might be looking for Sadie and Harlow, and they all needed to be careful. "Is it a bad person?" Maisie asked. "Yes," Gavin said honestly. "Someone who was mean to them before. But he's not going to hurt you, and he's not going to hurt them, not while I'm here. What if he's really strong? Then we'll call the police, and they'll take him away." Maisie thought about this seriously. "Are Sadie and Harlow going to leave?" "No, sweetheart. They're staying right here with us." "Good." Maisie reached out and took both twins' hands. "You're family now. Family doesn't leave." Harlow's eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you, Maisie." That night, nobody slept well. Gavin woke at every sound, his body tense and ready for confrontation. He checked the camera feed on his phone a dozen times, seeing nothing but empty darkness and the occasional deer wandering through. By morning, nothing had happened. Another day passed the same way. Then another. A week went by with no sign of Derek or anyone else looking for the twins. Gradually, the tension began to ease, though none of them relaxed completely. Gavin went back to work, bringing in steady money. The twins found new jobs in Ridgeview, Sadie working maintenance at an apartment complex, Harlow cleaning houses. The pay wasn't as good as Margaret's farm had been, but it was something. The house continued its transformation. By mid-November, they had a functioning kitchen, a bathroom that didn't leak, bedrooms with actual beds instead of mattresses on floors. The place was starting to look like a real home. And slowly, carefully, they began to believe they might actually be safe. It was a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after Margaret had fired the twins, when everything fell apart. Gavin was in the kitchen making dinner while Maisie did homework at the table. The twins were upstairs, changing out of work clothes. Everything was normal, comfortable, routine. Then the motion sensor light outside flared to life. Gavin's head snapped up. Through the window, he saw a truck pulling into the driveway, an old pickup he didn't recognize. A man got out, tall and heavy-set, moving with the kind of aggressive confidence that made Gavin's instincts scream danger. "Maisie," he said quietly, "go upstairs, right now." "But now." She went, scared by his tone. Gavin pulled out his phone, opening the camera app, and stepped onto the porch just as the man reached the stairs. Derek. It had to be Derek. He was probably 40, with thinning hair and a face that might have been handsome once but was now marked by hard living and harder habits. He smiled when he saw Gavin, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Evening," Derek said pleasantly. "I'm looking for a couple of girls, twin sisters, about 21, blonde hair. I was told they might be staying here." "They're not," Gavin lied. "Really? Because I talked to a lady who runs a horse farm and she seemed pretty sure they worked for her until recently. Said she let them go because they were using fake names." Derek's smile widened. Now why would they do that unless they were hiding something? "I don't know what you're talking about. Now get off my property." "I just want to talk to them. They're family, my stepdaughters. I've been worried sick since they ran off." I said get off my property." Derek's expression hardened. "I know they're here. Their car's in your barn. Saw it when I drove up." Behind Gavin, the front door opened. Sadie stepped out, Harlow right behind her. Both looked terrified but determined. "It's okay, Gavin," Sadie said quietly. "We'll talk to him." "You don't have to. It's better if we do. Before this gets worse." Gavin wanted to argue, but he understood the calculation. If Derek was determined, refusing him would only escalate things. Better to face it head-on with witnesses and cameras recording. "Fine," he said. "But this conversation happens out here, in full view. You don't come in this house, and you don't touch either of them. Clear? Derek held up his hands in mock surrender. Crystal clear. I'm just here to talk. The twins came down the porch steps slowly, stopping a good 10 feet away from Derek. Gavin positioned himself between them and the man, his phone held openly, recording everything. Hey girls, Derek said, his voice dripping with false warmth. Been a while. What do you want? Sadie asked flatly. Want? I want to know why you disappeared without a word. Why you've been hiding from me for over a year. I thought we were family. We were never family, Harlow said, her voice shaking. You terrorized our mother and tried to control us. We left because we had to. That's not how I remember it. I remember helping you after your mom got hurt, paying bills, keeping a roof over your heads. And this is the thanks I get? You kept us trapped, Sadie spat. You took every penny we earned and made us beg for basics. You destroyed what little dignity our mother had left. Your mother signed papers giving me legal authority. Everything I did was within my rights. We don't believe you. We never saw those papers. Derek shrugged. Believe what you want. Doesn't change the facts. That house in Eugene, the one that got foreclosed, I had equity in that. Money I'm owed. You ran off and left me holding the bag for thousands in debt. That's not our problem, Harlow said. Actually, it is, because legally, you're responsible for your mother's debts, and since you disappeared, I had to cover them. Now you owe me. We don't owe you anything, Sadie said. A judge might see it differently. Derek's smile was cruel now. I've got documentation of everything I paid, every bill, every expense. I could sue you for it all, garnish your wages, put liens on anything you own, make your lives very difficult. Do it then, Gavin said coldly. Take them to court, but do it legally, with lawyers and judges. What you don't get to do is show up here making threats. Derek's eyes shifted to him. Who the hell are you? The man whose property you're standing on, the one who's recording every word you're saying, and the one who's about 5 seconds from calling the police if you don't leave. I'm not doing anything illegal, just having a conversation with my stepdaughters. Former stepdaughters, Harlow corrected. You have no legal relationship to us anymore. Our mother's dead, and any rights you might have claimed through her died with her. That's where you're wrong. Derek reached into his jacket, and Gavin tensed, but he only pulled out a folded paper. Power of attorney, signed by your mother 2 months before she died, giving me authority over her affairs and guardianship rights over you two until you turn 21. We're 21 now, Sadie said, but you weren't when you ran, which means you violated the terms of this agreement, which means I could make a case for prosecution, harboring runaways, theft, fraud. That's garbage, and you know it, Gavin said. They were adults when they left. Whatever that paper says doesn't matter anymore. Maybe, maybe not, but do they want to risk finding out? Do you want to risk being charged with harboring fugitives? The threat hung in the air, ugly and effective. Gavin could see the twins wavering, could see Derek's satisfaction at having found the right pressure point. Here's what's going to happen, Derek said smoothly. You two are going to come with me. We're going to sit down like civilized people and work out what you owe me. Once we've settled the debt, you're free to go wherever you want. But until then, you're coming with me. No, Gavin said flatly. They're not going anywhere with you. That's not your decision. Actually, it is, because they're adults living on my property by my invitation, and you have no authority here. If you want to pursue legal action, hire a lawyer and do it properly. But they're not leaving with you tonight. Derek's facade of pleasantness cracked. You don't know what you're dealing with. Yeah, I do. You're an abuser who's lost control, and you're desperate to get it back. But it's not happening. Not here. Not now. For a long moment, Derek just stared at him, rage simmering beneath the surface. Then he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Fine. Have it your way, but this isn't over. You girls think you can just run away and forget about me? You're wrong. I know where you are now. I know who you're with. His eyes swept over the farmhouse. Nice place you've got here. Be a shame if something happened to it. That's a threat, Gavin said, his voice deadly calm. And I've got it recorded. Make one move against this property or anyone in it, and I'll have you arrested so fast your head will spin. Derek smiled one last time, cold and calculating. We'll see. He turned and walked back to his truck. They all stood frozen, watching as he climbed in and drove away, his taillights disappearing into the darkness. The moment he was gone, Harlow collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Sadie sank down beside her, both of them shaking uncontrollably. Gavin immediately called the police, reporting the threats and sending them the video. Then he went to the twins and crouched beside them. "Hey," he said gently. "Hey, look at me." They raised their heads, faces streaked with tears. "You did good," he told them. "You stood up to him. You didn't let him take you. That took guts." "He's going to come back," Harlow whispered. "He's going to hurt us." "No, he's not. Because we're ready now. We know what he looks like. We know what he wants, and we've got everything documented. He makes one wrong move, and I'll bury him in legal trouble. You don't understand what he's like when he's really angry. Then we'll deal with that too, together." Gavin helped them both to their feet. "Come on, let's get inside." They stumbled into the house, where Maisie was waiting at the top of the stairs, her face pale. "Is the bad man gone?" she asked. "He's gone, sweetheart." "Is he coming back?" Gavin wanted to lie, wanted to tell her everything was fine, but she deserved the truth. "I don't know," he said, "but if he does, we'll be ready, and he won't hurt anyone, I promise." Maisie came down the stairs and hugged him tightly. Then, to his surprise, she hugged both twins as well. "Don't be scared," she told them. "My daddy's really strong and really smart. He'll keep us safe." The simple faith in her voice almost broke Gavin's heart. That night, nobody slept. They took turns watching the camera feed, jumping at every sound. But Derek didn't return. Not that night. But they all knew he would eventually. And when he did, they'd have to be ready. The police came by the next morning. 2 officers who took statements, reviewed the video recording, and promised to increase patrols in the area. They couldn't arrest Derek based on what he'd said, but they filed an official report and warned Gavin that he should call immediately if Derek returned. "Keep your doors locked," the older officer advised. "Document everything. And if he sets foot on your property again without permission, that's criminal trespassing. We can act on that." It wasn't enough, but it was something. After they left, Gavin sat the twins down at the kitchen table. Maisie was at a neighbor's house, a kind older woman named Ruth who'd agreed to watch her for a few hours, giving them space to talk frankly. "We need rules," Gavin said. "Real ones. Starting now." "What kind of rules?" Sadie asked. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but her voice was steady. "Nobody goes anywhere alone. If you're working, you travel together or with me. If you're running errands, same thing. I don't care if it's inconvenient. We're not giving him opportunities to corner either of you by yourselves." "Agreed," Harlow said immediately. "Second, we establish a check-in system. You're supposed to be home by a certain time and you're not? You call. I'm late getting back from work? I call. We keep communication constant, so we always know where everyone is." "What about Maisie?" Sadie asked. "She walks to Ruth's house sometimes?" "Not anymore. One of us walks her, or she doesn't go. I know that sounds extreme, but Derek made a threat against this property. I'm not taking chances with her safety." Both twins nodded, understanding in their eyes. "Third," Gavin continued, "we need to talk about money. If Derek's serious about suing for those debts, you two need legal representation. That's expensive. I can help cover some of it, but we're going to need to tighten our budget even more." "We're not asking you to pay for our legal problems," Harlow protested. "You're not asking. I'm offering. We're in this together now, whether we planned it or not." Gavin leaned back in his chair. "Look, I know this is scary. I know you're both terrified he's going to show up again and make good on his threats. But running isn't the answer anymore. You've got a home here, jobs here, people who care about you. We fight for that. We don't give it up because some abusive bastard thinks he can intimidate us." Sadie's jaw tightened. "What if fighting makes it worse? What if he comes after you and Maisie?" "Then we deal with it. But I'm not letting him win by scaring us into submission." "Why?" Harlow asked quietly. "Why are you doing all this for us? We're not your responsibility. We're not your family." Gavin looked at her for a long moment. "Aren't you?" The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. In the 6 weeks since the twins had arrived, they'd become woven into the fabric of his and Maisie's lives. They'd turned a broken house into a home, filled empty rooms with laughter and conversation, given his daughter the kind of stability he couldn't provide alone. Somewhere along the way, the arrangement had stopped being temporary and started being essential. "You are family," he said finally. "Maybe not by blood, maybe not by any legal definition, but your family in the ways that matter. And I protect my family." Harlow's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard. Derek's not going to give up easily, and we're going to have to be vigilant for a long time. Maybe forever." "We can do that," Sadie said. "We've been running for over a year. Standing and fighting feels better, even if it's scarier." They spent the rest of the morning reinforcing security. Gavin installed better locks on the windows and bought a baseball bat that he kept by the front door. Sadie added more cameras covering every approach to the house. Harlow created an emergency contact list and made sure everyone had it programmed into their phones. By the time Gavin picked up Maisie from Ruth's house, the farmhouse felt less like a home and more like a fortress. That night at dinner, Maisie was quieter than usual, pushing food around her plate without eating much. "What's wrong, kiddo?" Gavin asked gently. "Are Sadie and Harlow going to die like Mommy did?" The question landed like a punch. Across the table, both twins went still. "No, sweetheart," Gavin said, his throat tight. "They're not going to die. But the bad man wants to hurt them. He wants to scare them. There's a difference, and we're not going to let him hurt anyone." "But what if he's really mean? What if he has a gun?" Gavin exchanged a glance with the twins. They'd been trying to shield Maisie from the worst of it, but kids were perceptive. She'd absorbed more than they realized. "Come here," he said, pushing his chair back. Maisie climbed into his lap, and he wrapped his arms around her. "I need you to listen to me, okay? Really listen." She nodded against his chest. "Sometimes bad things happen, and we can't control them. When your mom got sick, I couldn't stop it no matter how hard I tried. That was one of the hardest things I've ever been through, and I know it was hard for you too. But this situation with Sadie and Harlow is different. We know the danger exists, and we're taking steps to stay safe. We're calling the police, we're being careful, and we're all looking out for each other. But what if it's not enough? Then we'll deal with it. But I promise you, Maisie, I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, and to keep Sadie and Harlow safe. That's a promise I can keep." She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she lifted her head and looked at the twins. "You're not going to leave, right? Even if the bad man is scary?" "We're not leaving," Harlow said firmly. "This is our home. We're staying." "Good." Maisie climbed down from Gavin's lap and walked around the table. She hugged Sadie first, then Harlow, with the fierce intensity only children can manage. "You're my family now. I don't want to lose any more family." Both twins were crying. Harlow pulled Maisie into her lap, holding her close. "You're not going to lose us. We promise." The moment was tender and heartbreaking, and Gavin felt his own eyes burning. This was what family looked like, messy and complicated and built on shared fear and hope in equal measure. The next few days passed in tense watchfulness. Derek didn't return, but his presence hung over everything like a storm that hadn't quite arrived. They went through their routines, work, meals, evening time together, but everyone was constantly looking over their shoulders, waiting for the other shoe to drop. On Friday, Gavin got home from work to find Patricia Reeves, the lawyer, sitting in her car in his driveway. "Ms. Reeves," he said, approaching cautiously, "is everything okay? I need to talk to you and the twins. Is now a good time?" His stomach clenched. "Come inside." They gathered in the living room, Gavin, the twins, and Patricia, who spread several documents on the coffee table. "I did some digging into your situation," she said, looking at Sadie and Harlow. "The good news is that Derek's power of attorney claim is questionable. The document he showed you was signed while your mother was on heavy pain medication, which could make it invalid if we can prove she wasn't of sound mind. Additionally, guardianship rights terminate when the wards reach age 18, not 21, so his claim there is completely false." "So he was lying," Sadie said. "About some of it, yes. But here's the bad news. He did pay a significant amount of money toward your mother's medical bills and household expenses. I found records showing payments totaling nearly $40,000 over 2 years. Harlow's face went white. "We don't have $40,000. He can't actually recover most of it. Medical debt doesn't transfer to children in Oregon unless they co-signed, which you didn't. The household expenses are harder to quantify, and he'd have to prove they were loans rather than gifts, which is difficult. But he could make your lives very difficult trying. Legal battles are expensive and time-consuming, even when you're in the right. So what do we do? Gavin asked. Honestly, wait and see if he actually files anything. There's a good chance he won't. Men like him rely on intimidation, not actual legal process. If he does file, we fight it. But in the meantime, you document everything. Every contact, every threat, every incident. Build a case for harassment. That's it? Sadie's voice was bitter. We just wait for him to make the next move? Unless you want to file a restraining order, yes. And frankly, based on what happened the other night, you probably have grounds. The implied threats against the property could be enough. How much would that cost? Harlow asked quietly. Filing fee is about $100. If it goes to a hearing and you need representation, more. Gavin made a decision. File it. Do whatever paperwork you need to do. Send me the bill. Gavin, no, Sadie started. I said we're in this together. I meant it. Patricia gathered her documents. I'll prepare the petition this weekend. You'll need to appear in court probably next week. Be prepared to testify about his history of abuse and the recent threats. After she left, the twins sat in stunned silence. This is really happening, Harlow said finally. We're actually fighting back. We are, Gavin confirmed, and we're going to win. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. In the days leading up to it, they prepared meticulously, gathering photos, text messages, the video recording from Derek's visit, written statements from Margaret about the suspicious call she'd received. Patricia coached the twins on what to expect, how to answer questions, how to stay calm under pressure. The night before the hearing, none of them could eat much dinner. Maisie, sensing the tension, was clingy and quiet. After Gavin put her to bed, he found the twins sitting on the porch in the cold night air, wrapped in blankets. Can't sleep? He asked, joining them. Too nervous, Sadie admitted. What if the judge doesn't believe us? What if Derek shows up and makes us look like liars? Then we deal with it. But Patricia thinks we have a strong case. Patricia didn't live through 2 years of his manipulation. She doesn't know how convincing he can be. Gavin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, When my wife was dying, there was a point where the doctors wanted to try an experimental treatment. It was expensive, insurance wouldn't cover it, and the success rate was low. But it was our only shot, so I started looking into ways to pay for it. I considered taking loans from predatory lenders, selling everything we owned, even committing fraud to get the money. The twins looked at him, surprised by the confession. I didn't do any of that, he continued, but I thought about it, obsessed over it. The desperation made me consider things I never would have otherwise. In the end, we couldn't afford the treatment, and she died anyway. But the point is, I understand what it's like to be so desperate that you'll do anything, consider anything, to survive. What's your point? Harlow asked quietly. My point is that Derek's desperation is showing. He's not the calm, controlled manipulator he was when you were under his roof. He's scrambling, making mistakes, leaving evidence. That means we have the advantage. We just have to keep pushing. What if pushing makes him dangerous? Sadie asked. What if he decides if he can't control us, he'll destroy us? Then we call the police and he goes to jail. But we can't live in fear of what he might do. We have to live like we deserve peace and safety, because we do. Sadie leaned her head on his shoulder, and Harlow took his hand. They sat like that for a long time, drawing strength from each other as the stars wheeled overhead. The courthouse in Ridgeview was small and crowded, smelling of floor polish and anxiety. They arrived early, dressed as professionally as their limited wardrobes allowed. Patricia met them in the hallway outside the courtroom, carrying a briefcase stuffed with documents. Derek's here, she said quietly. He's got a lawyer, some guy from Eugene, who handles a lot of domestic cases. They're going to argue that this is a family dispute that should be resolved privately. It's not a family dispute, Sadie said. We're not related to him anymore. I know, and we'll make that clear. Patricia checked her watch. We're up in 15 minutes. Remember, answer the questions truthfully and concisely. Don't let them bait you into emotional responses. You're credible, competent young women who were victimized and are seeking protection. That's the narrative. When they entered the courtroom, Gavin spotted Derek immediately. He was sitting with a lawyer in an expensive suit, looking calm and almost sympathetic. The transformation was stunning. This was not the aggressive, threatening man from the farmhouse. This was someone's concerned stepfather, worried about wayward girls who'd run away. Gavin felt his blood boil. The judge was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. She called the case, and Patricia stood to present their petition. Your Honor, we're seeking a restraining order on behalf of Sadie and Harlow Mitchell against Derek Brennan. Mr. Brennan subjected these young women and their late mother to years of psychological abuse and financial control. After their mother's death, my clients fled to escape his influence. Last week, Mr. Brennan tracked them to their current residence and made implicit threats against them and the property where they're living. We have video evidence of this encounter, as well as documentation of his history of abuse. Derek's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is a mischaracterization of a family disagreement. Mr. Brennan was in a relationship with the petitioner's mother for several years and helped support the family financially during a difficult time. The young women left without warning, leaving Mr. Brennan responsible for significant debts. He merely sought to discuss a repayment arrangement. By showing up uninvited at their home and making threats? Patricia interrupted. Alleged threats, Derek's lawyer corrected. We dispute the characterization of the conversation. The judge held up a hand. I'll hear testimony. Miss Reeves, call your first witness. Sadie took the stand, her hands trembling but her voice strong. She described Derek's relationship with their mother, the gradual takeover of their finances, the intimidation tactics, the way he'd isolated them from friends and potential help. She talked about their mother's death and Derek's claim on the house, the months of fear before they finally escaped. Derek's lawyer cross-examined aggressively, trying to paint her as a rebellious stepdaughter with a grudge. But Sadie held her ground, refusing to be rattled. Then Harlow testified, corroborating everything Sadie had said and adding details about Derek's visit to the farmhouse, the veiled threats, the intimidation, the way he'd tried to force them to leave with him. Finally, Gavin took the stand. He described the encounter from his perspective, played the video recording, and testified about the fear his household had experienced since Derek's appearance. This man showed up at my property uninvited and made threats against my family, Gavin said firmly. Not just the young women, but my 5-year-old daughter who lives there. He made it clear he knows where we live and implied he could damage the property. That's not a family disagreement. That's intimidation. Derek's lawyer tried to discredit him, suggesting he was manipulating the twins for his own purposes. Gavin nearly lost his temper, but Patricia's warning look kept him in check. After all the testimony, the judge reviewed the evidence in silence. Then she looked up, her expression severe. Mr. Brennan, she said, approach the bench. Derek stood, still playing the role of concerned stepfather. But Gavin could see the tension in his shoulders, the barely controlled anger. I've reviewed the evidence and heard the testimony, the judge said. Whether or not you believe your actions were justified, the fact remains that you appeared at the petitioner's residence uninvited, engaged in a confrontational conversation, and made statements that could reasonably be interpreted as threatening. The video supports this characterization. Your Honor, I was merely trying to have a conversation. You were trying to intimidate 2 young women who have every right to live free from harassment. I'm granting the restraining order. You are to have no contact with Sadie Mitchell, Harlow Mitchell, or Gavin Cross. You are not to come within 500 feet of their residence or places of employment. You are not to contact them directly or through third parties. Violation of this order will result in arrest and criminal charges. Do you understand? Derek's mask slipped just for a moment. Gavin saw raw fury flash across his face before he got it under control. I understand, Derek said through gritted teeth. Good. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place for 1 year, at which point the petitioners may request an extension. The judge banged her gavel. We're adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the twins collapsed against each other, shaking with relief. Patricia shook Gavin's hand and promised to send the official paperwork once it was processed. You did well, she told the twins. All of you. This is a significant victory. What if he violates it? Harlow asked. Then he goes to jail. The order has teeth. Use it if you need to. They drove back to Maple Ridge in stunned silence, hardly able to believe it was over. When they pulled up to the farmhouse, Maisie came running out with Ruth following at a more sedate pace. "Did you win?" Maisie demanded. "We won," Sadie said, scooping her up. "The judge said the bad man can't come near us anymore." "Good." Maisie wrapped her arms around Sadie's neck. "I was worried." "We know, sweetie. But you don't have to worry anymore." That night they celebrated with takeout pizza and ice cream. The relief was palpable, like a physical weight had been lifted. They laughed more than they had in weeks, and when Maisie fell asleep on the couch between the twins, nobody wanted to move her. "We should probably establish some new ground rules," Gavin said eventually, keeping his voice low so as not to wake Maisie. "Now that the immediate crisis is over." "Like what?" Sadie asked. "Like making this arrangement official. You two have been here almost 3 months. You're working, contributing to the household, helping raise Maisie. At some point we need to formalize what this is." "What do you want it to be?" Harlow asked. Gavin considered the question. What did he want? The answer came easier than expected. "I want you to stay. Not as temporary guests or employees or people we're helping out, but as permanent members of this household, equal partners in making this place work." "You mean like roommates?" Sadie asked. "More than that. Family. Real family." He looked at both of them. "I know that's a big ask, and I know we're all still figuring this out. But I can't imagine this house without you two in it anymore. Neither can Maisie." Harlow's eyes filled with tears. "We feel the same way. This has been the first real home we've had since our mom died. The first place we've felt safe and wanted and like we belonged." "Then let's make it official," Gavin said. "We'll sit down this weekend and work out the details, how we split expenses, how we make decisions, all the practical stuff. But the foundation is that we're in this together for the long haul." "Deal," Sadie said, extending her hand. Gavin shook it, then pulled her into a hug. Harlow joined them, and they stood there in the middle of the living room, holding each other while Maisie slept peacefully nearby. The next few weeks settled into a new normal. With the restraining order in place and Derek legally barred from contact, the constant vigilance eased. They still locked doors and checked cameras, but the paralyzing fear faded into simple caution. The house continued its transformation. By early December, they'd finished renovations on all the main rooms and started tackling the barn, which Sadie wanted to convert into a workshop. Harlow's house cleaning business was growing through word of mouth, and she'd started talking about making it official, registering as a business, getting insurance, maybe even hiring help eventually. Gavin got a promotion at Webb's company, bumping his pay to $25 an hour with benefits. The financial pressure that had been crushing them for months finally began to ease. One evening, after Maisie had gone to bed, Gavin found Harlow in the kitchen making hot chocolate. She'd gotten good at cooking over the past months, experimenting with recipes and slowly building confidence. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Just restless. Want some?" She gestured to the pot on the stove. "Sure." She poured 2 mugs and they sat at the table, the house quiet around them. "I've been thinking," Harlow said slowly, "about what you said, about making this official, making it permanent." "Having second thoughts?" "No. The opposite, actually." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "I want to contribute more, not just with money and work, but with Maisie. She's been asking me to help with her homework, to braid her hair, to do all these mom things, and I want to. But I don't want to overstep." Gavin's throat tightened. "You're not overstepping. Maisie needs that. I can't give her everything she needs. I can be her dad, but I can't be her mom too. If you want to step into that role, even partially, I think that would be good for both of you." "Really?" "Really. You're already doing it anyway. Reading to her, comforting her when she's scared, teaching her things I don't know how to teach. Making it intentional doesn't change anything except acknowledging what's already there." Harlow smiled, eyes bright with tears. "Thank you. That means everything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking their cocoa. Then Harlow said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Do you ever think about dating again? Finding someone?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know. Sometimes, maybe. But it feels complicated with everything else going on." "You deserve to be happy, Gavin. You deserve to have someone who cares about you the way you care for everyone else." "Maybe someday," he said non-committally. Right now, I'm focused on making sure you and Sadie and Maisie are okay. Everything else can wait. Something flickered across Harlow's face, an emotion he couldn't quite read. But before he could ask, she stood and took their empty mugs to the sink. We should get some sleep, she said. Tomorrow's going to be busy. Yeah, good night, Harlow. Good night. He watched her go upstairs, a strange feeling settling in his chest. Something had shifted in that conversation. Some line had been crossed or recognized, but he couldn't quite identify what it was. By mid-December, the farmhouse looked like something from a renovation show. They'd finished the interior work and started on the exterior. New paint, repaired siding, a porch that no longer sagged. The barn had been cleaned out and partially converted, with space for Sadie's tools and a small office area where Harlow could manage her growing business. Maisie thrived. She'd made friends at school, was doing well in her classes, and had started asking about getting a dog. The shadows that had haunted her eyes for so long had faded, replaced by the bright curiosity of a happy child. One Saturday morning, Gavin woke to find the kitchen already full of activity. Sadie was making pancakes, real ones, not the flat disasters he usually produced, while Harlow set the table and Maisie chattered about her upcoming school holiday program. Morning, sleepyhead, Sadie teased. We thought you were going to sleep all day. What time is it? Almost 9. You never sleep this late. Gavin realized with surprise that he felt rested. Actually rested for the first time in months. The constant stress and vigilance had been draining him without him fully realizing it. Sit down, Harlow said. Breakfast is almost ready. They ate together, the four of them crowded around the table, and Gavin looked at each of their faces. Maisie animated and happy, Sadie confident and relaxed, Harlow serene in a way she'd never been when they first met. This was his family now. Not the family he'd planned or expected, but the one he'd found. After breakfast, Maisie dragged them all outside to look at the rabbits that still lived under the barn. She'd been leaving vegetables out for them, and they'd grown bold enough to approach when she sat very still. Look, she whispered as a small brown rabbit hopped closer. That's Clover. She's the bravest one. How can you tell them apart? Sadie asked, crouching beside her. Clover has a white spot on her back paw. See? They spent an hour watching the rabbits, and Gavin marveled at how something so simple could feel so complete. This was what he'd been fighting for, not just survival, but moments like these, peace, joy, the freedom to just exist without fear hanging over everything. That evening, after Maisie was asleep, the three adults sat on the porch, despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching their breath fog in the air. I have something to say, Sadie announced, and I need you both to let me finish before you respond. Okay, Gavin said cautiously. I want to go back to school, community college, maybe eventually university. I want to study engineering, structural engineering specifically. I'm good with my hands and good at figuring out how things work, and I think I could actually build a career out of it. That's amazing, Harlow said immediately. But it would mean less income for the household, Sadie continued, at least for a while. And I'd need help with tuition, which I know we can't really afford right now. So I wanted to put it out there, see what you think. Is it crazy? Should I wait? Gavin smiled. It's not crazy, and you shouldn't wait. If that's what you want, we'll figure out how to make it work. Financial aid, student loans, whatever it takes. Really? Really. You've got talent, Sadie. You should use it. She launched herself at him, hugging him fiercely. Thank you. Thank you. What about you? Gavin asked Harlow. Any dreams you're putting on hold? She was quiet for a moment. I want to build my cleaning business into something real. Maybe eventually expand into home organization. Help people who are overwhelmed get their lives together. I know what it's like to feel buried and helpless. If I can help other people dig their way out, that would mean something. Then do it, Gavin said. We'll support you however we can. What about you? Harlow asked. What do you want, Gavin? What's your dream? He hadn't thought about his own dreams in so long that the question almost stumped him. But sitting there between the two women who'd become essential to his life, looking at the house they'd rebuilt together, the answer came clearly. This, he said simply, I want this. A home that's stable and safe. Maisie growing up happy and healthy. The people I care about pursuing their dreams and succeeding, that's all I need. That's not very ambitious, Sadie teased gently. Maybe not, but it's enough. They sat together as the stars came out, three people who'd found each other in desperation and built something stronger than any of them could have managed alone. The road ahead still had challenges. Derek's restraining order would expire eventually, money would always be tight, life would throw obstacles their way. But they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. Winter settled over Oregon with a vengeance, bringing freezing rain and early darkness that made the farmhouse feel like an island cut off from the rest of the world. But inside, warmth radiated from more than just the wood stove. They'd strung Christmas lights along the porch and around the windows, and Maisie had insisted on a real tree that now stood in the corner of the living room, decorated with a mismatched collection of ornaments they'd bought at a thrift store. It was the first Christmas since her mother's death that Maisie seemed genuinely excited about, and Gavin found himself caught up in her enthusiasm despite his own complicated feelings about the holiday. "Can we make cookies?" Maisie asked one evening in mid-December, bouncing on her toes. "The kind with the shapes that you cut out?" "I don't know how to make those," Gavin admitted. "I do," Harlow said from the kitchen doorway. "My mom and I used to make them every year. I think I still remember the recipe." "Can we, please?" Maisie's eyes were huge and pleading. "Tomorrow after school," Harlow promised. "We'll make a whole batch." Watching them plan together, Gavin felt something shift in his chest. Over the past months, he'd watched Harlow step naturally into a maternal role with Maisie, not replacing her mother, but filling some of the empty spaces her death had left. And Maisie had responded with an openness that still surprised him, seeking Harlow out for comfort and companionship in ways she hadn't since losing her mom. That night, after Maisie was asleep, Gavin found himself alone with Harlow in the living room. Sadie had gone to bed early, exhausted from her first week of community college classes. The house was quiet, except for the crackle of the fire and the wind howling outside. "Thank you," Gavin said quietly, "for being so good with her." Harlow looked up from the book she'd been reading. "I'm not doing anything special, just spending time with her. It's more than that. You're giving her something I can't, that feminine presence, that gentleness. She needs that." "She needs you too. You're a good father, Gavin." "I'm trying, but I can't be everything she needs." Harlow set her book aside, her expression thoughtful. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When Sadie and I lost our mom, the worst part wasn't the grief, though that was terrible. The worst part was feeling like we'd lost our place in the world. We had no anchor, no home, no one to care if we disappeared. We were just adrift." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You gave us that back. You and Maisie. You gave us a place to belong again." "You gave us the same thing," Gavin said. "This house was just a building before you two showed up. You turned it into a home." "We did that together." "Yeah, we did." There was a charged moment where neither of them spoke, something unspoken hanging in the air between them. Then Harlow smiled and picked up her book again, and the moment passed. But Gavin lay awake that night thinking about it, about the way his heart had jumped when she smiled, about how natural it felt to share the quiet evening hours with her. Somewhere along the way, his feelings had shifted from simple gratitude and friendship into something deeper. He didn't know when it had happened or what to do about it, but he couldn't deny it anymore. The next afternoon, true to her promise, Harlow and Maisie made cookies. The kitchen became a disaster zone of flour and sugar and food coloring, but the end result was dozens of decorated cookies in shapes of stars and trees and snowmen. Maisie was covered in frosting and absolutely delighted. "These are the best cookies ever," she announced, biting into a lopsided star. "Save some for your dad and Sadie," Harlow laughed, gently extracting the mixing bowl from Maisie's reach before she could eat the raw dough. When Gavin got home from work, he found them still in the kitchen, Maisie chattering away while Harlow cleaned up the mess. The domestic scene hit him with unexpected force. This was what he'd lost when his wife died. This simple, everyday magic of coming home to warmth and laughter and people who were happy to see him. "Daddy, look!" Maisie shoved a cookie at him. "I made this one special for you." It was supposed to be a Christmas tree, but looked more like a green blob with sprinkles. "It's perfect," he said, taking a bite. "Best cookie I've ever had." "That's what you always say." "That's because it's always true when you make them. Maisie beamed and ran off to show the cookies to Sadie, leaving Gavin and Harlow alone in the kitchen. "You've got flour in your hair," he said, reaching out without thinking to brush it away. Harlow went very still at his touch. Their eyes met, and Gavin realized how close they were standing, how easy it would be to close the distance between them. His hand lingered against her hair, his heart pounding. "Gavin," she whispered. "Yeah? Whatever she was going to say was cut off by Sadie calling from upstairs, asking if dinner was ready. Harlow stepped back quickly, her cheeks flushed. "I should finish cleaning up." "Right, yeah." Gavin moved away, his own face burning. "I'll go check on Maisie." He retreated upstairs, his mind spinning. What had that been? Had he imagined the electricity between them, or had she felt it too? And what was he supposed to do about it? They lived together. They were raising Maisie together. Their lives were completely intertwined. Getting involved romantically could complicate everything, or it could make everything better. He didn't have answers, just a growing certainty that his feelings for Harlow weren't going to disappear if he ignored them. Christmas approached rapidly. They didn't have much money for gifts, but they drew names and set a $20 limit, focusing on thoughtfulness rather than expense. Gavin spent hours in the barn workshop making Maisie a small bookshelf for her room, sanding and staining it until it was smooth and beautiful. For his drawn name, Sadie, he found a used engineering textbook she'd mentioned needing for her spring semester classes. The twins went shopping together in Ridgeview and came back with mysterious bags they hid in their room. Maisie, who'd drawn Harlow's name, made her a card decorated with glitter and stickers and a hand-drawn picture of their family, 4 stick figures holding hands in front of a house. On Christmas Eve, they stayed up late watching old movies and drinking hot chocolate. Maisie fell asleep sprawled across Gavin's lap, and he carried her up to bed, tucking her in with her now-beloved rabbit. When he came back downstairs, he found Sadie had gone to bed, leaving him alone with Harlow again. She was standing by the Christmas tree, adjusting ornaments with a faraway expression. "Penny for your thoughts?" he said softly. "Just remembering past Christmases. My mom loved this holiday. She'd go all out even when we couldn't afford it. Decorations, music, special meals. She wanted everything to be perfect for us." "Sounds like she was a good mom." "She was. Not perfect. She made mistakes, especially at the end with Derek, but she loved us fiercely. I miss her most this time of year." Gavin moved to stand beside her. Maisie's mom was the same way. Christmas was her favorite holiday. She'd start planning in October, making lists and baking cookies and wrapping presents with elaborate bows. Last Christmas was hard. She was so sick, but she still tried to make it special for Maisie. Spent her last bit of energy putting up decorations and wrapping gifts. His voice caught. She died 3 weeks later. Harlow took his hand, squeezing gently. "I'm sorry." "Me too." He looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. "But this Christmas feels different. Not better than the ones before. I don't think anything will ever replace what we lost. But good in its own way. Because of you and Sadie. Because Maisie's happy again." "She's not the only one who's happy," Harlow said quietly. "I see it in you too. You smile more. You laugh. You've let yourself start living again instead of just surviving. That's because of you." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. Harlow's breath caught, and Gavin realized he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. But instead of taking it back, he stepped closer. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to let me finish before you respond, because if I don't say this now, I'm going to lose my nerve." "Okay," she whispered. "I care about you. More than I should, probably. More than is smart given how complicated our situation is. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it's been building since that first night, or maybe it hit all at once. But I can't ignore it anymore. You've become essential to my life in ways that go beyond gratitude or friendship. When I come home from work, you're the person I want to see. When something good happens, you're the person I want to tell. When I imagine the future, you're in it." He took a breath. "I understand if this is too much, if it changes things in ways you don't want, but I needed you to know." Harlow's eyes were bright with tears. "Can I respond now?" "Yeah." "I feel the same way. I have for weeks, maybe longer, but I was terrified to say anything because I thought maybe I was imagining it, or maybe you saw me as just a friend, Or maybe getting involved would destroy what we've built here. I didn't want to risk losing this, losing you and Maisie and this home, because my feelings got in the way. Your feelings aren't in the way, Gavin said, his heart pounding. They're exactly what I was hoping for. So what do we do? I don't know. Take it slow, see where it goes. We don't have to rush anything or change everything overnight, but I'd like to try. If you want to. I want to, Harlow said, smiling through her tears. I really want to. Gavin cupped her face gently, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, when she leaned into his touch instead, he kissed her. It was soft and sweet and tasted like hot chocolate and possibility. When they pulled apart, Harlow was laughing quietly. That was worth waiting for. Yeah? Definitely yeah. They stood there wrapped in each other's arms, the Christmas lights twinkling around them, and Gavin felt something he hadn't felt in years, genuine hope for the future. Christmas morning was chaotic and joyful. Maisie woke everyone up at 6 a.m., insisting they had to open presents immediately. They stumbled downstairs in pajamas and robes, and Gavin made coffee while the twins got the fire going. Maisie tore into her presents with enthusiasm, delighting over the bookshelf Gavin had made and the art supplies the twins had pooled their money to buy. Sadie's face lit up when she opened the textbook from Gavin, and she immediately started flipping through it, already absorbed. Harlow opened Maisie's card and started crying, happy tears that she tried to hide but couldn't. This is beautiful, sweetie. Thank you. Do you like how I drew us? Maisie asked. That's you, and that's Daddy, and that's me, and that's Sadie. We're all holding hands because we're a family. I love it, Harlow said, pulling Maisie into a hug. I'm going to frame it and hang it in my room. They spent the day cooking together, a modest Christmas dinner of roasted chicken and vegetables, with Harlow's cookies for dessert. They played board games and watched movies and just existed in each other's company without stress or fear, shadowing everything. That evening, after Maisie had gone to bed exhausted and happy, Gavin sat down with Sadie while Harlow was in the kitchen. I need to tell you something, he said, and I want to make sure you're okay with it. Sadie looked up from her textbook. This sounds serious. Harlow and we talked last night about our feelings for each other. We're going to try dating, but I wanted to make sure you're comfortable with that, given that we all live together and it could change the dynamic. Sadie was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she smiled. About time. What? Gavin, I've been watching you two dance around each other for weeks. The way you look at her, the way she lights up when you come home, it was pretty obvious something was happening. I'm happy for you both. And no, it doesn't change anything for me. You're both still my family regardless of whether you're dating or not. You're sure? Positive. Harlow deserves happiness. So do you. You're good together. Gavin felt relief wash over him. Thank you. That means a lot. Just one request, Sadie added with a mischievous grin. Try to keep the romance stuff to a reasonable level. I don't need to see you two being gross all the time. We'll do our best, he laughed. The new year arrived quietly. They stood on the porch at midnight, bundled in coats and scarves, watching fireworks in the distance over Ridgeview. Gavin had his arm around Harlow, Maisie was perched on Sadie's shoulders, and they counted down together as the year turned. Happy New Year, they said in unison, and Gavin felt the weight of the past year, all the fear and struggle and uncertainty finally beginning to lift. January brought new challenges, but they faced them together. Sadie threw herself into her classes, staying up late studying and filling notebooks with engineering calculations. Harlow officially registered her cleaning business and got her first major contract, a property management company that needed regular service for their rental units. Gavin got promoted again at Webb's company, this time to a supervisory role that came with better pay and health insurance for all of them. The farmhouse, now fully renovated, felt like a real home. They'd transformed the disaster Gavin had bought into something beautiful and functional, a place where laughter echoed off walls they'd repaired with their own hands, where meals were shared at a table they'd rebuilt, where everyone had their own space but chose to spend most of their time together anyway. In February, the restraining order against Derek came up for renewal. They appeared in court, presented evidence that he'd made no further contact, and the judge extended it for another year without objection. Derek didn't even show up, and Gavin allowed himself to hope that maybe he'd finally moved on. Spring arrived gradually, bringing warmth and new growth. They planted a garden in the cleared space behind the house, vegetables and flowers both, working together to turn the soil and set seedlings. Maisie took charge of watering duties, insisting the plants needed her attention every single day. One evening in April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Harlow leaned against Gavin's shoulder and said, "I think we should talk about the future." "What about it?" he asked, running his fingers through her hair in the casual way he'd gotten used to. "About what we want long term, about where this is all going." Gavin glanced at Sadie, who was sitting on the steps with Maisie, helping her with homework. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking this house is getting a little small for 4 people, and I'm thinking maybe we should consider finding a place in town, something bigger, closer to Sadie's school and my work. We could keep this property, maybe rent it out eventually, but have a more practical home base." "You want to move?" The idea surprised him, even though it made sense. Not move away, just move forward. This place was about survival and healing. We've done both. Now maybe it's time to build something more permanent, more intentional. "What do you think?" Gavin asked Sadie. She looked up from Maisie's math worksheet. "I think Harlow's right. This house served its purpose. It saved us. But we don't need to stay stuck here just because it worked once. We can honor what it gave us and still move on." "What about you, kiddo?" Gavin asked Maisie. "How would you feel about moving to town?" Maisie considered this seriously. "Would we all still live together?" "Of course." "Would I have my own room?" "You could have your own room, maybe even a bigger one than you have now." "And could we get a dog?" Gavin laughed. "We'd have to see about the dog, but maybe." "Then I think we should do it," Maisie decided. "But I want to visit the rabbits sometimes and say goodbye to them properly." "We can do that," Harlow promised. They spent the next few months looking at houses in Maple Ridge and the surrounding area. It took time to find something that fit their unusual household dynamic and their budget, but in late June they found it. A 4-bedroom house on a quiet street, with a fenced yard and a garage that could serve as workshop space for Sadie. It needed some work, but nothing like the farmhouse had required. The decision to buy it together, all 3 adults on the mortgage, felt momentous and right. They were officially committing to this life they'd built, making it legal and permanent in ways that went beyond sentiment. "Are you sure about this?" the real estate agent asked, looking at their unusual application. 3 unrelated adults buying together can be complicated. "We're sure," Gavin said firmly. "We're family. It doesn't matter that we're not related by blood." They moved in August, just before Maisie started 2nd grade. The farmhouse looked strange and empty, without their furniture and belongings, but Gavin felt at peace leaving it. That house had given them what they needed: safety, time to heal, space to become a family. Now it was time to move forward. The new house filled up quickly with life and laughter. Sadie's engineering textbooks took over the dining room table. Harlow set up a home office for her business in one of the bedrooms. Maisie decorated her room with posters and drawings, and they finally got her the dog she'd been begging for, a rescue mutt named Biscuit, who was part golden retriever, part mystery, and all enthusiasm. One evening in September, nearly a year after the twins had first appeared in his life, Gavin stood in the kitchen of their new house helping Harlow with dinner, while Sadie and Maisie played with the dog in the backyard. The normalcy of it, the sheer everyday mundanity, struck him as miraculous. "What are you thinking?" Harlow asked, noticing his expression. "Just that a year ago I was standing in a falling-apart farmhouse, wondering if I'd made the worst decision of my life. And now I'm here, with you, with all of this. It seems impossible." "Good impossible or bad impossible?" "The best impossible." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "I love you. I don't think I've said that clearly enough." "I love you too," she said, smiling up at him. "And I think you should know, Sadie and I have been talking about the future, about making things more official." "What do you mean?" "I mean that if you wanted to, if you were thinking about it, we'd both be open to you and me getting married, really making this family legal in every way." Gavin's heart stuttered. "Are you proposing to me?" "Maybe. or at least opening the door to the conversation. I know it's complicated with Sadie living here and Maisie to consider and all the logistics, but yes, Gavin interrupted. Yes? Yes. I want to marry you. I've been thinking about it for months, but wasn't sure if it was too fast or too weird given everything. But if you're open to it, then yes. Absolutely yes. Harlow's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? You're it for me, Harlow. You and this crazy family we've built. I don't want to be without any of it. She kissed him then, deep and sure, and through the window they could hear Maisie's laughter mixing with the dog's barking and Sadie's voice calling them to come see something. They got married in November, in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with Sadie as witness and Maisie as flower girl. It wasn't elaborate or expensive, just simple and true, which was all they needed. Afterward, they went out for pizza and ice cream, the four of them crammed into a booth at a local restaurant, and Maisie announced to the entire place that her dad had just married Harlow, and now she had a new mom. Not replacing your first mom, Harlow clarified gently, always careful about that distinction. Just adding to your family. I know, Maisie said, but you're still my mom now. And Sadie's like my big sister, and we're all together forever. Forever, Harlow agreed, her voice thick with emotion. That night, after Maisie and Sadie had gone to bed, Gavin and Harlow sat in their living room, their home, their life, their family all around them in the form of scattered shoes and dog toys and homework papers. Do you ever think about that first night? Harlow asked, when we heard your truck pull up and we were so scared? All the time, Gavin admitted. I think about how close we came to this not happening, if I'd called the cops like I was supposed to, if you'd run instead of staying, if Maisie hadn't asked that question about you living with us. Best question she ever asked. Yeah. He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid reality of her against him. I spent so long after my wife died feeling like I was drowning, like everything good was behind me. And then I found you two in a house I could barely afford. And somehow that became the beginning of everything. We found each other, Harlow corrected. All of us. We were all drowning, all desperate, all broken. And we found each other and decided to hold on. Best decision I ever made. Second best, she said with a smile. The best was buying that falling apart farmhouse in the first place. Gavin laughed. Fair point. Though at the time it felt like the worst decision. That's how the best things always start, looking like terrible ideas until you get far enough in to see what they really are. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the house settle around them, to the soft sounds of Sadie studying in her room, and Maisie's gentle snoring from upstairs, and Biscuit's paws clicking on the floor as he wandered. Thank you, Gavin said finally, for taking a chance on us, for staying, for building this with me. Thank you for letting us, Harlow replied, for seeing past the fear and the complications and choosing to believe we were worth it. You were always worth it, you and Sadie both. So were you and Maisie. It was true. They'd all been worth it, the risk, the struggle, the fear, all of it. Because the alternative was staying alone, staying broken, staying trapped in survival mode instead of moving towards something better. They'd chosen each other. Not perfectly, not without mistakes or complications, but genuinely and completely. And in choosing each other, they'd built something stronger than any of them could have managed alone. 2 years later, Sadie graduated from community college with honors and transferred to a 4-year university on a full scholarship. Harlow's business had grown enough that she hired 3 employees and was considering expanding into property management services. Gavin had become a senior project manager at Webb's company, overseeing major developments across the region. Maisie, now 9, was thriving, bright and happy, and surrounded by people who loved her fiercely. She still remembered her first mother and kept pictures of her in her room, but she'd also fully embraced Harlow as her mom in all the ways that mattered. The farmhouse they'd left behind was rented to a young couple starting out, and sometimes Gavin drove past it and marveled at what it had become. Not just a building, but a symbol of transformation, proof that broken things could be made whole again. On a warm evening in late spring, they gathered in their backyard for Maisie's 9th birthday party. Friends from school ran around with Biscuit, Sadie was grilling burgers, and Harlow was cutting cake while Maisie supervised to make sure everyone got equal-sized pieces. Gavin stood back, taking it all in. This life they'd built from desperation and determination and love. It wasn't the life he'd planned. His first wife would never be replaced, and the twins would always carry the scars of what they'd survived. But it was a good life, a full life. A life where broken people had found each other and decided that together was better than apart. "Daddy," Maisie called, "come help blow out the candles." He joined his family because that's what they were, fully and completely. And as they sang and Maisie made her wish, Gavin felt nothing but gratitude for the door that shouldn't have been empty, for the smoke curling from a chimney that should have been cold, for two terrified young women who'd cleaned his house and changed his life. Sometimes the best thing you ever find isn't the house you bought or the plan you made. Sometimes it's the people waiting inside when you arrive, unexpected, unplanned, and absolutely perfect. The candles went out in a rush of breath and laughter, and Gavin pulled Harlow close, kissed Maisie's forehead, and caught Sadie's eye across the table. They'd all come so far from that desperate first night, and they'd keep going forward together, building their future one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of faith at a time. That was the real story, not the farmhouse or the renovation or even the triumph over Derek. The real story was four people who could have stayed broken, who could have stayed alone, who could have chosen fear over hope. But they hadn't. They'd chosen each other, and in doing so, they'd chosen life.